points during that. And they were good, but we should have beat them. I mean, it was,
I know
we
how
played hard.
horrible it is.
Yeah.
Well, before the game, they were playing Keith in the warm-up course. And so I told them to knock it off. And then when they were warming up, they were walking through it. And got picked up. And I don't know. They would play well. That game went lost by 1. Could easily won that.
Yeah.
And then if we'd won that, we'd play the team.
Championship game.
Well, then we'd play the team that beat us
Oh, you had.
by 10. And then if we won that, we'd play the team that beat us by whatever. How many that was. So. But they leaving Saturday, they were good. Sunday was played pretty well. I mean, that one, the team that beat us was pretty good. But they still played well, and that other game they played well. So you can just see a lot of stuff that's new to them that they haven't won. It'll come. I'd say on that second one, we should be pretty sure. So
Kaiser said he had a good time, so.
that's good. He played well.
Kaiser is like the kid that will always try his hardest.
Well, I told him, I said, you need to dial that back. Sometimes he's trying too hard.
Yes.
You know, like,
No.
yeah, I love the effort, because then I called him out and I said, you know, he's got the best effort of anybody, but it's just, he needs to know when to.
No. There's, yeah, you're exactly right.
You don't have to, he's never short of effort. Mother kids wish we had that effort. Like if Ethan was dressing up from his mom. Because that kid's,
He's got lots of talent. It's just some days you're like,
yeah, where'd he go? He's a good player.
no, it's such a pretty shot.
He started, he was slow. As he got better, as he got more comfortable, took over.
I watch him play when he's on. I don't know if Paul's supposed to be here or not. I didn't get an email.
Everybody ready? Go ahead and call the USD 49 Board of Education meeting for Monday, May 21st to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Been moved by Board Member O'Borney. Have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Fox. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is audience participation. Nobody tonight. All right. Next item is the Best of the Best Awards. The Best of the Best Awards are designed to recognize those students or staff that go above and beyond in their day-to-day activities. They truly are exemplary in every way. The winners will receive a limestone plaque as well as a gift certificate from local businesses, and the winners have been nominated by their peers. Our student Best of the Best winner this month is Dustin Schneider, and I believe Dustin was nominated by Sue Rouse, and I think she is here to share a few words.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education, administration, family, and guests. It is my pleasure to present to you a really awesome young man. He is truly the best of the best. I met Dustin because I had to ask his name because he was always in the office, but I never called him there, so I had no way to know his name, so I finally had to ask him. But he truly is an exemplary young man. He was president of FFA, vice president of the Student Council, a member of the National Honor Society, and in Chamber Singers. That makes him the best of the best, but that's not even the best part. What Dustin knows is that there's no I in team. I watched him last year as a STUCO officer, and when something needed to get done and the person in charge didn't do it, he stepped in and made sure it got done. Wasn't anything about Dustin, it was just it needed to get done, and therefore, that's what he needed to do. He practiced service above self. When he would come in this year, there was always a gaggle of Stuco members, but he was always so encouraging. He always said positive things, and when they get to speak on the microphone, sometimes that's a little daunting to some of them, and he would just, make it fun, say something lively, get their attention, and he was always just an encourager. And that's really awesome to see a young man who doesn't think about self, but thinks about how others are, what he can do to help others. He helped build and make a team. When I needed somebody, Dustin was there. One day, we were having a little incident in the office, and I had a parent come in who needed to get some supplies for their student, and I really didn't have time to deal with the parent. I called the teacher. The teacher wasn't there, so we were like two blind people not knowing what we needed to do for this parent, and who was standing in the hallway with his cell phone out. But he did tell me that was because of Stuco, so I couldn't take it away from him. And I asked him if he would walk down to the art department and pick up these supplies and help this father take care of the needs for his daughter. And I think he kind of said, yeah, well, I maybe. And then the next thing I know, he's in the office with the art supplies, giving them to the father. I'm not even part of it anymore. He's taking care of it in the most professional manner. Father left. He was very happy, and I was just grateful that Dustin was there in the hallway so that I could ask him to do a favor for me. One other time, it was one of those, it was supposed to be spring, but we had winter weather, and a couple of young ladies came in the office and their car wouldn't start. And they called their dad, and the dad said he would come by and get it jumped, but they didn't know how long that was going to be. And guess who was standing in the office? Dusty. And I said, Dusty, you got jumper cables? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, could you help these young ladies get their car started? And, he gave me one of those. I really have better things to do. But he said, I'll be happy to do it. So he took care of his business in the office, and out the door he went with these two young ladies to get their car started. I don't know if they needed it, if their father got there first, or if you got them started, or whatever happened. All I know is that he was willing to step up and give his time and his knowledge and take care of two students that he didn't even know. That makes Dustin Snyder really one of the best of the best.
Thank you, ma'am. Before Dustin comes through, I do want to share, because I've not been able to. I don't get to know students very well. But Sue's not exaggerating at all. From the standpoint of one time I went to the high school, I was going to buy some plants at from the ag class, and I was late. And he says, oh, don't worry about it. I said, no, I'll come back another time. He says, no, I'll show you what we have. Well, they were supposed to be going home, but he walked me through and showed me the different plants. Another time I went in there, and as she said, he's the greeter, I think, at the high school, because he said, I don't know. But the most fun story of this was him sharing with me, I think it was earlier this year, maybe it was last year, his delight in telling me that he was mistaken as the substitute teacher today. Do you remember that, Dustin? I thought, yeah, that's pretty easy to happen, especially for you. But that was a good time. Yeah.
Gaggle the official term for Stuco?
I guess so.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you. I don't think I missed any. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, And our staff Best of the Best award winner this month is Jay Sanders. Jay was nominated by Paula Rice, and I believe she is here to share a few words as well.
I can't really top anything what Sue said about Dusty, because kids like Dusty grow up to be amazing teachers like Jay. He is always in the office. He is always there to help. He answers the phone, and I have picture proof of it. It's great. He answers the phone. He picks up anybody's duty when he needs it. He has filled in for us the last 4 months and given away his planned time every day to cover for very short staff at recess with a smile on his face every day. He's always there when I need him for anything and everything. And then you add on top of that a really phenomenal educator, and you just get the best of the best. A lot of people tend to underestimate the PE teachers. They're just PE teachers. This incredible guy builds social skills every day. We had a young lady this year that spoke no English when she got to us, and he would take her and infuse her right into the class, and she felt supported, but never once was she babied. He sets his expectations high, and those kids get there, every single one of them, every single day, but they know they're loved, they know they're cared for, and they know how to make him happy. I am incredibly grateful to have him. Roosevelt is incredibly blessed to have him, and the district is far better off with him. He really is the best of the best.
Thanks again to our sponsors this month, Thirsties and Gellas, and once again, congratulations to Dustin and Jay.
Now we've got 2 other meetings.
Oh, yes, good.
They will put in there sometime. Okay, moving on to next item on the agenda, which is communications from other organizations.
I have none.
Nothing? Okay. Next item on the agenda is school spotlights. John?
Spotlights, we end up having Hayes Middle School 6th graders participated in the Madrigal Banquet. They've done that for some time, but they ended up completing their unit history studies regarding the medieval history, and they celebrated what they learned. The 6th graders were assigned various stations of royalty, commoner, clergy, musician, servant. Those are different stations that they ended up taking on. They created their own costumes. They ended the celebration with a feast of food that would have been kind of during that time with cheeses and fruits, bread, rice, chicken, ham. Really thank all the volunteers and staff and Gellas for providing the dessert, for the banquet. So, another exciting item was students. We had 11 Hayes High School business students for the first time. They're taught by Lindsay Hart. They were able to take the Word MOS certification exam this May, and 7 of the 11 passed the exam. Really, they're officially certified in Word MOS at this time. This was the first time for all 11 students, and very proud of those 7 that did pass the test. DECA students, they competed at international conference. We had 11 high school students participate in Atlanta, Georgia. That was in April. Callie Liker, Isabel Brown, and Brianna Fornish finished in the top 16 of 160 entries for their community service project. Ryan Hernandez and Abigail Dickinson finished in the top 32 in the finance operations research competition. Lisa Schoenberger and Caitlin Shaven finished in the top 32 in public relations project. And Cheyenne Shoemaker completed the Ignite Leadership Training Program. The students are sponsored by business teacher Shayna Proud. Journalism students did a fantastic job. There's quite a list there. I'll identify congratulations to them in Class 4A sweepstakes championship in Lawrence, Kansas on May 5th. 14 of the students placed in the top 6 spots. Competition sponsored by Kansas Scholastic Press Association. The Indians earned 37 points, outperforming second place Chanute by 5 points. And the students are listed there, but there's quite a list in the different areas. They just did an outstanding job. And then we want to identify Hayes Arts Council creative writing winners. We ended up having quite a number of them from all the different schools with their poetry was included in this as well. You can go through and there's quite a list you can end up seeing of the students that were involved with it. We had Hayes High Production earn 5 Jester Awards for the Hunchback of Notre Dame. The production was nominated for 11 Jester Awards, and they won 5 of the 11. Erin Muirhead came home with the leading actress Jester. The production also won the Ensemble Chorus Jester. Johnny Matlock received the Jester for vocal music direction. Jenny Rajewski received the Artistic Guest Jester. She also won the Design Guest Jester with Scenic Design Jeremy Wan. This year's Jester Awards were held at Century 2 Performing Arts Center in Wichita. The Lady Indians ended up upset Mulvane in the 4A Central South Central Region number 2 championship game this last week. The Lady Indians finished off Mulvane in 3rd overtime, beating them 2-1. Sophomore Sophie Humphrey scored the regulation point, and sophomore Isabel Robbins scored the second point in the 3rd overtime. Lady Indian soccer team is coached by Silas Hibbs. The Indians is going to face McPherson tomorrow at 6 o'clock. We really wish them the very best tomorrow. It's very exciting for that. Had the golf, this is a little late information. I have some new information to share as well. The boys golf team, they played 4A state golf at Emporia after winning the Nickerson Regional Championship last week. It's the 6th back-to-back regional championship for the Indians. Junior Tragan McCrae led the Indians by shooting 75, winning the individual regional title. Junior Josh Norris captured 3rd place with 79 strokes, and senior Alan Zollinger shot 81, earning him 4th place. Hayes narrowly beat out and held by 1 stroke. This is the 10th straight year the team has qualified for state. Congratulations to the boys golf team. And I went in and looked at that. It appears that they ended up getting 2nd place at state. Andover Central got 1st, and I think Tragan is what it looked like may have gotten 4th overall. So they did very well. We end up having Hayes Middle School Lady Falcons soccer team. They ended up claiming the WAC title. A team finished the season undefeated. This is the 2nd straight season that the Falcons have not allowed their opponents to score a goal against them. The team's coached by head coach Tammy Robin and assisted by Courtney Molliker. So very nice information to end up sharing about every school. You know, it's nice to have information about the elementaries, middle school, high school.
Very good. Any other questions for John on the spotlights? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is report of the superintendent.
The report's short as well. I just want to point out that tomorrow's the beginning of the Supreme Court that's going to end up addressing the money issues for the state. So they won't have an answer, please understand that, but it's going to start tomorrow, I think at 9 in the morning. I'm told that it still could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, who knows how long it would be before we know for sure. But that process is still in play.
Very good. Any questions for John on that? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the financial report. Tracy?
I wanted to point out 3 exceptions, number 9, 29, and 35, all have to do with benefits where we are over budget
those are situations where an employee may have selected health insurance differently than what we thought they might, or they signed up for the 403B. It's usually happening in small locations, like under Washington, what the district is paying, things like that, where it stands out a little bit more. Usually we're able to absorb those because I do estimate high and anticipate new employees may take, the most expensive insurance and things like that. But those are showing up on there. Overall, through the month of April, we are 8% under budget. And so we do plan on bringing an item in June to the meeting, asking you to transfer money to contingency reserve again this year. Of course, we don't have that money, that dollar amount finalized, but we will be able to plan on doing that. In capital outlay, again, this is through April, but we did just receive notice on what our June payment will be from the county, which will be $875,000. So that puts us at $2.9 million in revenue, where we had anticipated 2.5. So we're a little over $400,000 more in revenue in capital outlay than what we had originally thought. And John did mention that the Supreme Court, we are moving forward with the budget based on what the law is now, and we will wait and see what the Supreme Court ends up deciding on that. And that's all I have. Answer questions.
Very good. Any questions for Tracy on the financial report? Seeing none, we will move on to the next item, which is the consent agenda to approve the board meeting minutes for April 30th, 2018, the approval of bills in the amount of $2,739,241.94, personnel transactions, financial reports to include the clerk's report and investment report. And also would like to point out in personnel transactions that Johnny Matlock will actually be retiring as well after 20 years in the district. So we thank him for his service.
Henry Armconnect as well for 4 years of service.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that one on the next page. Yes. So thank both of them for their service. Get a motion to approve that.
I'd make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay. Been moved by Board Member O'Borney. Seconded by Board Member Young. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is the Kansas Education System's accreditation update. And I think Shanna is going to go over some stuff for us.
Yes, we tabled this the last time, the meeting got a little lengthy. We wanted to review the last of the videos that outline the new measures that are part of our new accreditation. So we'll go to that first. And then I want to share with you, because we just finished the year one of our accreditation, we did submit a final report to the state, and that's attached to that. So if you remember, we have been taking one video each month. We've been looking at the measures, the outcomes that as a district will want to show growth in over the next 5 years, this being the end of year one. So this year was to develop goal areas. Next year will be to develop an action plan, and then we'll have 2 years to implement that plan, and in year 5, we'll continue to review and progress monitor, but then we'll have year 5 to see how we did in the areas of social and emotional growth, kindergarten readiness, individual Kansas study, high school graduation, civic engagement, and then post-secondary completion. So post-secondary completion is the video that we'll view here, and then I have a little more information about that to follow.
Post-secondary attendance and completion. High school graduation is a huge milestone for Kansas students. However, it shouldn't be the finish line. Instead, it should just be the beginning. A study conducted by the Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce looked at job growth and workplace education requirements. The study predicts that by the year 2020, 71% of the jobs in Kansas will require some additional form of education after high school. That's 6 percentage points above the predicted national average. Of that 71%, approximately 36% will require a bachelor's or master's degree, and 35% will require a 2 years associate's degree or vocational certificate. Students graduating high school without earning the necessary workforce requirements will find it difficult, at best, to ever reach the middle class. The results of this study, combined with the input from statewide community conversations, convinced the Kansas State Board of Education that greater focus needs to be placed on post-secondary attendance and completion. Before we can ensure the Kansas workforce pipeline is well supplied with talent, We first have to ensure students graduate high school. But it's not enough to simply graduate students. We have to graduate students who are academically and cognitively prepared, who have technical skills and employability skills, and who are civically engaged in order to be successful in their post-secondary pursuits. That's a responsibility shared by every teacher, kindergarten through high school. You're probably thinking, we're K through 12 education. What does post-secondary education have to do with us? Everything. When you think about it, every piece of the board's vision for education, social emotional growth, kindergarten readiness, individual plans of study, civic engagement and graduation, is leading us to this destination of post-secondary attendance and completion. Each outcome leads to the next. We also know that between 70 and 75% of all Kansas graduates must complete some level of post-secondary education, whether that's a 4-year degree, 2-year degree, certification program, or entering the military, in order to meet Kansas's workforce needs by 2020. So how do we know for graduating students with the skills needed to be successful after graduation? We'll start by monitoring what our students do 2 years after high school graduation. Most post-secondary institutions, such as colleges, community colleges, and technical schools, submit their student enrollment data to the National Student Clearinghouse, or Nsc for short. This data includes high school graduates that attend both in-state and out-of-state schools and follows them for 6 years. Using this data, schools will be able to measure the percentage of their high school graduates who have entered into some form of post-secondary education after high school. Then, Nsc looks at the percent who are retained in a post-secondary education program the second year after high school graduation, or the percent who earned a post-secondary degree. When at least 70% of Kansas students achieve any of these milestones the first 2 years after graduation, the K-12 education system will have met its goal. Nsc data does have its limitations, though. For instance, the clearinghouse data is not able to account for certificates students earn while still in high school. In a report that we will discuss later in this presentation, KSDE will add in the certificate information starting with the high school graduating class of 2015, since it's not included in the Nsc data. Does not account for dual college credit students earned while in high school. Nsc data only represents student post-secondary enrollment after high school graduation. It also doesn't track non-degree seeking students, students who earn a GED, or students who enlist in the military. For these reasons, districts may need to collect additional information on what they know about the graduates. For example, districts will know which graduates enter the military, those who earn an industry-recognized certification while still in high school, and those who enter the workforce directly after graduation. Let's take a look at the types of reports districts are able to view within the authenticated application called Academic Measure of Student Success, AMOS, using the National Student Clearinghouse data. One such report is the Nsc Basic Report located in AMOS. This Nsc Basic Report provides data that is only reported to districts and enables them to follow a single graduating class during a 6-year period. Each segment of the bar chart represents the following. Graduated, meaning a student has completed an associate's, bachelor's, or higher degree. Certificates earned in high school are included. New to college. Retained in a post-secondary program. Returned after stopout. The student was enrolled in the post-secondary program the first year, didn't appear in the clearinghouse enrollment database the following year, but reappeared the year thereafter. No longer enrolled and not graduated. The student was enrolled in post-secondary education, but currently isn't, and there is no record in the clearinghouse database of the individual having graduated from a program. Not at Nsc to date. The student wasn't found in the clearinghouse database. This could be the result of the post-secondary institution not participating in Nsc reporting, or the student opting out of reporting. Institutions that report to the clearinghouse represent more than 97% of the nation's 2- and 4-year post-secondary enrollments. The green area of this chart represents the percent of, in this case, the class of 2010 graduates who went on to post-secondary education. Remember, Kansas needs at least 70 to 75% of its high school graduates to earn some level of post-secondary education in order to fill its workforce demand. Let's look at this class 6 years after graduation. Just 39.6% of these Kansas graduates have completed a post-secondary degree or credential. Clearly not enough to fill the available jobs in Kansas. Now let's look at the KSDE Post-Secondary Progress Report, which is publicly available in the Building Report Card on the KSDE website. This report provides districts with a 5-year average of their graduation rates, post-secondary success rates, post-secondary effective rates, and a predicted effectiveness rate. The graduation rate is the 4-year adjusted cohort, which is the number of students who graduated in 4 years with a regular high school diploma, divided by the number of students who entered high school as a 9th grader 4 years earlier, adjusting for transfers in and out. The post-secondary success rate is the percent of high school graduates that have met one of the following outcomes within 2 years after high school graduation. As discussed earlier, this is where KASDE includes students that have earned an industry-recognized certification while in high school, starting with the graduating class of 2015. Earned a post-secondary certification, earned a post-secondary degree, or was enrolled in a post-secondary program in both the first and second year following high school graduation. The post-secondary effective rate is the calculated graduation rate multiplied by the calculated success rate. The effective rate factors in all students, those who did and didn't graduate high school, whereas the success rate only factors in those students who graduated high school. The goal for Kansas is to have an effective rate of 70 to 75% in order to meet the needs of the Kansas workforce. Factoring in the uniqueness of every school district, KSDE researchers developed what is called a predicted effectiveness rate. Research shows that there are several risk factors that influence student success rates. What's different is the degree to which these risk factors are present. What may be heavily influencing student success in one district may not be a factor in another. KSDE focused on 4 risk factors to which a weighting system was applied. They are cumulative poverty, chronic absenteeism, suspension and expulsion, mobility. Based on the district's unique student population and the presence of these 4 risk factors, KSDE researchers were able to calculate a predicted range of what the district's 5-year average post-secondary effectiveness rate should be. This provides a baseline measurement from which districts can determine whether they are meeting, exceeding, or falling short of predicted post-secondary effectiveness rates. Districts will also receive individual student data from Nsc and should use this data to begin asking themselves questions about the types of experiences the students had while in their school district and how those experiences prepared them for success after high school, helping them determine if adjustments need to be made. Today's students are the future workforce and future leaders of Kansas. As Kansas educators, it's our job to make sure they're well prepared with the academic and non-academic skills needed to be successful after graduation. Not every job requires a student to earn a 4-year degree, but every student must have a plan for meeting the education requirements necessary to participate in Kansas's workforce.
So post-secondary success, that's been the most difficult measure for districts to wrap their minds around, and probably just anyone in general, public as well. So basically in that video, I point out a few things that in order to meet the needs of the workforce in the future, 72% of our graduates need to have something beyond a high school diploma. And as they point out, that doesn't mean everyone needs to go to a 4-year university and get a bachelor's degree. There are certificates, there's associates, there's all kinds of different post-secondary education and success. So it's not one size for everyone. They talked about the definition of a successful high school graduate, so we keep that in mind as well as a district. So really we're looking beyond our K-12 system to 2 years after, if you saw that. So we will be getting data back on our graduates 2 years past their graduation date. They're using the National Student Clearinghouse. It's not perfect, but they're doing a lot better job. This past year they've got more and more schools, even community colleges on board with that, but districts have to spend some time scrubbing their own data, so we get individual data back on students. So we will have to look at those students not accounted for in that National Student Clearinghouse and find out where they went. Some of those kids may be joining their family business and they're successful. They're just not part of that 72%. I think this graphic shows you best that we're not saying anyone who joins the military or is an apprentice or works in a family business isn't successful. They will make up the 25 to 30% of our graduates, but we need the 71, 72% that have some type of post-secondary completion. So that's the goal for districts and across the state. Questions about that, the video information, and I will share where we are, our progress as a district here. That's the next attachment, but are there any questions, or John, do you have anything to add? Okay, so this is our Hayes post-secondary progress. So this is our graduates, 2011, 12, 13, 14, and then 15. So the first yellow is the graduation rate, graduation average. So of those students who started with the graders, how many, what's the percent that graduated in 4 years? And so you can see that. That's something we reported out. The next kind of salmon color is the success average. And so that's, that's the percentage. The success rate would be the percentage of students of the graduates who met one of those 4 criteria down below, like I talked about in the video. Student who earned an industry-recognized certificate while in high school, some type of post-secondary education, they earned a post-secondary degree already, or they're enrolled first and second year of some type of education in high school. So you can see we were 54, we were as high as 57 in the class of 2012. With 2015, we were at 53.8. Then they take those two and come up with the 5-year effective average. So if you remember, we didn't graduate 100%. If we graduated 100%, then that 53.8 would also be our effective average. So we have to take that times the percent of students we graduated to get the effective average. So 46.5 rounded up to 47% is where we were with the class of 2015. Now, this bottom lighter blue is that range, that predictive effectiveness that they took into account those risk factors, cumulative poverty, chronic absenteeism, suspensions, expulsions, and mobility for Hayes in this area. And so where they would predict and expect us to be, so we are meeting the expectation because we're in that range. Of course, we'd all like to be exceeding it, and we will work to improve that. But this is one of those measures that we will continue to look at. Again, scrub the data. A few risk factors that the state didn't identify, but I feel as a district, and every district has different populations and different risk factors because of the community and programs. One of the things I think that might play into our numbers, and that's why we're going to look at the data, is having a strong SPED co-op. We get a large number of students who come here to be part of our SPED co-op. We have a higher SPED average. Our average for students identified is higher than the state average. And so, not that those students still can't achieve, but that's something that we will look at as well. The other thing, which can be good and bad, is the learning center. We often pick up students who come to our learning centers who have dropped out elsewhere and are usually behind credits, but they enroll in our high school. So that can impact where we are with the graduation rate as well, because those students become ACE High students, even though they didn't start as ACE High students. So those are some unique things about our district that we will look at as we continue to study this. But we wanted to share where we were. We will continue to get this data and share it with you at different times.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, so 2015, we have 47% the effective average, which means 53% of the graduates are not doing one of those 4 things. Does that mean we don't know what those 53% are doing, or we know they're not doing those 4 things? It's a slight difference.
Well, we could probably, we as a district did get individual data, so we could find out if they're in the clearinghouse. I don't know that we could tell what every one of them did.
Well, it seems, what do they, 53% aren't doing anything?
Well, we do, and
You're doing something.
it's not in here. If you remember on the video, the multicolor
Yeah,
chart,
yeah.
we do get that as well. So we will look at that. Did some of them go the first year and then they dropped out? And so then we're saying then we're not preparing them well to be successful in college. So we do have that information as well, and we can try to dissect that to see if some just laid out a year and then came back that next year. I know Marty's talked about even calling some of the graduates and talking and trying to find that information, because until you, or knowing the parents and families well enough, but we could,
be a full-time job just to hire
could be,
someone to
yes.
scrub the data,
And
but
my point wasn't to suggest we're doing anything wrong. My point is maybe there's something that isn't being accounted for. It's hard to imagine 50% of
Well, some of them could be in the, again, the National Student Clearinghouse data is not perfect. So that's what these numbers are based on. So
That's
they're,
true, military's not.
right, the military, they went to a family business, they're on the family farm
That's right.
or anything. So that's not everyone as far as the success average and that effective.
Yep.
And one of the things, if we increase our graduation rate, then all those other numbers are going to increase if we were at 100%. So that's
Sure.
something that will continue. In the JAG-K program, that's one of the goals, and I thank the board for supporting that. So the more we can connect with students and try to keep them in school and prepare them, the individual plans of study, you can see how this will help. The sooner we start talking to kids and families about what is the right pathway and taking the classes that align with that, then hopefully they'll be successful outside of high school.
Maybe, if any of you wanted to, you can go to KSD's site, and you can make a compare. You can look at any school districts in the state.
Not
And-
easily anymore.
Well, I'm sorry?
They changed their whole website. It's not as easy to
It's
get
not as
that
easy?
it used to
Okay.
be.
Well, if you go to, are you going to the KSD building report card?
Yes.
Oh, okay. We pulled that up before, and I don't know, I probably had a link somewhere, but
But it should be available somewhere
Yeah.
where you can actually identify the schools, or the districts, and make a comparison. Because I know one way to look at that is going, that doesn't look too good. But as a comparison, it is. I mean, our numbers actually are good, even though it doesn't, you're looking at 47, 48% and think that's just, but there are those that are missing. You also have to include all those students, because we do have a number of students that go to college, but they drop out in the first year or even the second year, and that shows up in this as well. They do capture that 2 years after of identifying that as to, I guess some people would say, well, that's not on us. But they're trying to say that is. We're trying to prepare them so that they feel like they can actually go to a college and be successful there and make it through. And yeah, it does look kind of harsh that if they drop out after one semester, then we're kind of being penalized with the information. We are, but everybody else in the state is too. I mean, it is a fair comparison.
if you go to the report card and go to board goals, that's where there's the drop downs. If you go to post, you could go to, graduation rate and that, but what John's talking about, if you go to similar schools, then they will find some, when you run the report, you play around with it, then they'll compare to some similar size schools, demographics, that type of thing.
And what I was referring to, trying to get like a statewide comparison of all 200.
Oh no, they don't even make it easy for that.
3 years ago, you could do it.
Yeah,
before.
right now all you can do is one at a time. You can compare Hayes to another, then you can go redo it, and Hayes to. I mean, they make it cumbersome that way. But basically, you can get to all of them and make the comparison on that.
Shannon,
Please understand the difference. It's really amazing when you look at some of these numbers and compare. What does Salina look like? What does Junction City look like? What does Liberal look like? There is really some very significant differences when you're looking at some of these districts that we compete against, in athletics. Sometimes you just look at them as size, but boy, the complexity of their demographics and what they really deal with is really quite different. Trying to address some of these numbers. That's why, even though they do say they want to have graduation rate at 95%, and they say effective rate at 70 to 75%, this whole process of our 5-year improvement plan, our accreditation process, is a basis of improving. It's not a matter, if anybody's fearful of saying, well, if in 5 years we're not at 95%, and we're not at 70% with effective rate, we're in trouble. Not at all. what it should be is that we should be better than 87%. I mean, in many ways you could look at that and say 89% would be a success. You know, if you could increase it 2 percentage points or 3. And then with the 5-year success average, if that 54 could be in the 60s, that would be fantastic. That's what they're trying to push for, is just an improvement as you're going through this.
Yeah, I was just looking through the other, seeing if it was in it. You had made the comment that on like the SPED stuff, that we have a higher concentration. And do these numbers include the SPED stuff as well, then all of that?
Yeah, all of our students, is any.
Okay, so it's all of them across the board, even with, okay.
Students that would graduate, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And then I did attach the initial report we submitted to the state after year 1 of the KESA, our new accreditation system. And we've been sharing with you the process throughout the year. We have, this is the second year we've done perception surveys. We had buildings look at the rubrics and identify which area we feel like we should focus on as a district and buildings in the area of, remember, the relationships, relevance, responsive culture, and rigor. And so we had district-wide and then building-wide take a look at that. And the 2 goals that emerged are relationships and relevance. So those will be the 2 areas that we will develop an action plan for year 2, and then work through that next year. And we will continue to take a look at what are we doing with social and emotional growth. That was part of this report, to share what we're collecting now and what we plan to do. Kindergarten readiness, if you remember, and you'll be hearing about this, you may even hear as board members, we will be really trying to communicate intentionally with parents of incoming kindergartners this fall, and we will ask them to complete an ages and stages questionnaire for some cognitive development, but also a social and emotional survey, so that we will have that data as a district, but the state will have that collection of data to know how kids, they're coming to us with what needs and what we can do. Maybe work to 5 is the hope, to start building some of that pre-K, but will also help us to meet the needs as kindergarten and know the needs of the students we have in the class. So that, the first data collection point will be this fall. We talked about the individual Kansas study. That will continue. The high school has some student-led conferences that were successful this year. And then graduation rate and that post-secondary completion, as well as civic engagement. There it is. So I wanted to attach that for you to have as well. And you remember, we are working with Erie County, Salina, and Emporia, and you can see when we had our visitation, we worked with all those districts, and it's been nice to brainstorm and get feedback and learn from each other on that. So that's all I have, unless you have questions.
One of the last items for tonight's agenda is really a little bit of discussion on this retreat, the board retreat this summer. Please understand that so much of trying to identify goals is going to be swirling around this information as well. Beforehand, it was pretty much information was, because I was present a couple of years ago, it ended up being the board identifying things that was really important to them. They felt needed to be goals. We worked through that process. We even had Gary Sechrist here from KSB that assisted with that, and the goals were solid. I feel good about them. We've been working from them. The difference is, at this point, every school district in the state really should be utilizing this and marrying that with board goals as well, looking at that and trying to have them, they should complement one another. The whole process should. And so that's one. This information is going to be, the data is going to be very important to feed you before that retreat, so you end up having some of that information to help in identifying the goals.
Very good. Any questions for Shanna on that? Thanks, Shanna. Next item on the agenda is the property insurance.
We are up for renewal with PERMIP, our Kansas Educational Risk Management Pool. If you recall, when Christy Baldazar was here from Assurance Partners, we were one of the original 10 members in the pool, so I serve on the board of directors, and there are currently 21 members in the pool, and we're beginning our 4th year. If you go a couple slides down, Shanna, one more, I'm sorry. Up one more if you would, the colored chart. Okay. This shows, if you look at the column on the far left, the yellow is our deductible, the green is the self-insurance that the pool covers, and then the blue and the red are reinsurance that are held by Berkeley Insurance Company and Hartford Insurance. And so those two, the blue and the red, are driven by the marketplace. And with the hurricanes and floods that we've had these last couple of years, the marketplace is seeing an increase of 5 to 15% in their insurance. Because of that green section that's paying the majority of our claims, unless they get to a very large amount, it really does help us protect us in the pool. So our renewal is $4,700 higher this year, but that is less than 4% total. And also on top of that, because the pool is growing, we are increasing our administrative costs for legal representation. We are now paying an auditor, and we are in the process of hiring an actuary that can look at our first year and let us know what they believe would anticipate potential claims to be, so that way we can start paying back that money. I believe we have $300,000 left from that first year that will be coming back proportionately to the districts, but we need to make sure that we are being safe in that amount and not giving it all back in case there would be a future claim, you know, an abuse claim or something like that that can come up years later. So the actuary is what will help us determine how to send that surplus back to the district. So some of our costs have increased along with that, and that does account for part of the $4,700 increase also in our premiums.
So you're saying most of that is because of industry-wide, basically?
Yes, it is the cost of Hartford and Berkeley's reinsurance that is driving that.
I had a quick question, Tracy. When I went back and looked at that, they had our plan was $149,769, and I'm not. Does that include their fee? That was on that. What was in the board packet on that meeting they came?
Yes, that would have included theirs, and also maybe possibly work comp as well. Of $149, that would have included their fee also. Yes. I think they were trying to show that even with their fee, our costs were still going down. And we'll touch on work comp in a minute here.
And this one, we do want to make a motion tonight to approve that?
You can wait till June
Okay,
to do
that's why I was just checking, just to make sure.
work comp. Mhm.
Very good. Anybody have any questions on that for Tracy? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is workers' compensation. And let Tracy go over that as well.
And we did receive 2 quotes, one from Midwest Insurance in the amount of $151,000, and United Heartland, who is our current provider, for $124,201. Both of those did include the $2,500 deductible. And I put in here, we've been very pleased with the service and claims resolution by United Heartland. We feel that they are questioning some of the claims. They're asking us for additional information, which is what we would want them to do to make sure that they're accurately paying the claims. So we've been very happy with that. Our renewal is $8,473 less than last year, so it is going down, and a lot of that is based on the mod factor also that is decreasing. So we would recommend that we stay with United Heartland at the decreased cost of $8,400 this year.
And that one, I assume, we'll also vote on in June?
June is fine.
Any additional questions for Tracy on the workers' compensation?
Why are we not negotiating?
Because this is the first time we've heard about it. So give everybody a chance to just look over it, make sure there's no questions or anything like that.
Yes, both of those will be renewed July 1st. So if you do come up with any questions between now and the June board meeting, please let me know in advance so we can get those answers, so that's not delayed then.
Very good. And what is our mod factor right now? What did that go to? Because it didn't drop again?
It went down below 1.
Okay, good.
9.8, I believe.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah, that's the first year it's been under 1 in a very long time.
Yeah, in a while. Very good. Any other questions on that? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the district's copiers lease bid.
I will take that one also. Currently, we have 25 copiers in the district. We have our 2 large production machines in the copy center and 23 copiers in the building. Our lease is up with both the copy center and the ones in the building. So we sent out an RFP for 5 years and requested new or newly manufactured machines. And the cost per copy is inclusive. It does contain the machine, service, and supplies except for copy paper. We received 5 bids, and 2 of those were unsolicited. They were not on our vendor list, so I presume they received those off our website, which was exciting to see. The low bid was from Sumner One at a cost of $52,221. That is lower, is down $13,000, than what we are currently paying now, which is $65,200, and they would be new or newly manufactured machines. Sumner One received the Board of Regents contract and does have Fort Hays, so in November they implemented a whole new copy process, I guess, for implementation at the college. I did call over and ask them about their experience, and they were pleased with the way the new machines came in and how that whole process worked. One other thing that we are investigating with this is software that will be able to give us the kind of data that we've talked about having for a couple of years, where we can see exactly what is being printed at what location, what's on printers versus our copiers. All of that would be included in that, and would really give us a better idea of what direction we can go to, if we need to make changes, or if we want to start sending more to the copy center or whatever our plan would be at that point. That would give us that accurate data to be able to have that.
And we will have that with Sumner One, or that is something that's like a future development?
Actually, we'd have that with any one of these.
Any of them?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That software would end up being something that would work with any of these.
Okay.
And one other thing too, that we have a lot of printers. We've reduced greatly the number of printers over the last few years, but we do still have printers in the district for IEPs, confidential, sensitive information. With the software, we would be able to have the badge scanners where people can send it to the printer. It would hold there until they go up and scan their badge. So we would be able to reduce some of the printer costs as well by having that.
On here too, on the Sumner One, I was looking at the deal on that. Why is Nextech's address on there?
They have, as part of their agreement with Fort Hays, they were required to have a technician in Hays, and so they rented out a portion of Nextech's building is where their technician is housed. And when I spoke with them, they said, obviously, they're all new machines right now, Fort Hays and RGB2. So as the needs grow, as the machines age, they would be bringing in more technicians as needed to cover those service things. And it is, in our RFP, we do require a 90% uptime and also a 4-hour service response. And Fort Hays said that the service they have had, they've been very pleased with as well. It's been very quick.
Why do we have 25 copiers for 10 buildings, all right, on that number? Is that the right number of buildings we have is 10?
And up till now, when it's been,
11
per
if you
copy,
count Muncher.
we have not been charged for the machines, so it's per copy. So, if it's, I think we've got like one in the E building, some different outward locations and everything, but we're not charged for the number of copier machines we have.
But we are, this is though, right?
Well, it's still a cost per copy. I mean, obviously, they're going to incorporate some of that cost, yes, yeah.
It just seems like most of the larger entities I've seen, I mean, you walk, like one building could share a copier for the entire building, and I'm not wanting to rehash technology, but we're one-to-one with everything. And in 2004, and I know that nobody here, well, Shannon was here, I guess, but when we went one-to-one at the high school, the sale of it was, well, we're going to reduce paper. And 3 years ago, when we had this discussion on this, and I'm not trying to attack you, Tracy, but we discussed going paperless, and that the concept of going paperless is you can talk about it forever, but until somebody just says, we're going paperless, it doesn't happen. And now we're 3 years later, and we're still not going paperless. The number of copies at 5,100,000 is still right in the neighborhood of where we were in 2004. And I mean, if you take that out, I don't know, I ran some numbers beforehand, but we have 3,000, I thought we had 3,014. One of the things I just looked up said 3,157 students, but that's over 1,600 copies a student. And if you figure that out on the number of days we're in school, that's over 9 pages or copies a day per student. It just seems, I mean, this is one of those areas that we could save money that we could use somewhere else, whether it be another staff person or, you know, moving things around. It just, and what we discussed back then was the machines we have currently have the ability to put codes in for every user, to where we could have capped that. They may not have had the reporting function, but they had the ability to code it, and I think we even had a report back then that had everything broken out by, well, and I think that was actually for the copy center about who was bringing things down here, but you know, we argued again, we have 2 publication type copiers here, and we have 1 person running it, and I think the goal was to get rid of those and to go to build it. Years ago, it was to get rid of all the building-based ones and go to production-based here. And so we had a couple of employees here. We did all the printing out of here, and it was picked up and delivered. And then I'm not sure, it wasn't a board decision, but somebody made a decision we were going to go back to building-based copiers. But I mean, it's expensive to print things, and it just seems like if we've got, everybody's got a device, why are we printing so much paper?
I mean, I've been part of some of this discussion. I was with the thought, with the numbers I saw, it was 2 million less copies. 3 or 4 years ago, it was 7 million copies that was being printed, and recently is 5 million. The cheapest way to print is with these big units. I mean, that is definitely the most efficient way to do that. The most expensive is actual printers in classrooms. You know, that's definitely the most inefficient way to do any prints. I came from a district that was trying to do it that way, and I came into this one thinking that was the mode 2 of doing the counts and trying to know exactly who's misusing it, because it's not just in our buildings, but this would end up giving us push button reports of just easily identifying not just buildings, but teachers, staff, that's, you know, how much is being printed at that time.
And I don't know if it's still this way, but the last time we talked about it, Hayes High printed off its course book and gave one out to every student. And we used Fort Hays as an example and said they've quit doing that. They don't do it. And the reason they don't do it is because it's a waste of money.
Right.
And if you want it, and so I don't know if we've quit that.
Yeah, we have that.
But
That's online for them to access, but we don't print online.
I was hoping we still did with the number we're printing, because that would have been something you could say, well, we could get rid of that. And
You know, and I do know different things change. So having that reporting, I know we switched IEP programs, and I heard from teachers too, are like, oh my gosh, we have to print more, we're supposed to be more paper aware. So we're working on tweaking that, but that's what an accounting and tracking system would know. Is it more sped population with IEP? Where are those numbers so that we can take a look at that?
But I used, for those that weren't here, I used the example of my office. We went paperless, and we're paperless, not completely paper. I mean, it's almost impossible to be completely paper-free, but until we just decided that's what we were going to do, you always have those people that are going to say, well, I got to print that email so I can read it, or, you know, whatever it is, and I get in that habit sometimes too, but I mean, it really needs to come from you, John, to say, we're done. And we're going to, I mean, because 5 million copies is, right. I mean, when you look at it, and the only reason I did it by students, because, I mean, if you, and I know that only students aren't the ones that are utilizing this, you've got the business side of this that uses copies too, but when you look at it just based on students, that is an enormous, 10 pages a day, there's, I mean,
right.
Or 9, you know, 9 point something, so.
Well, and it's not, I agree completely, it should be less copies, but at the same time, it should be less copies from printers in classrooms, you know, and then next level should be fewer copies from the copier machines in the buildings. There should be more printed, what is going to be printed should be done in this location.
And Tracy, I guess that's my question, because you kind of addressed that a little bit. So because I would agree, it does seem like we went, you know, as a district, I know beforehand we were doing that, then we kind of went to where we were aiming it towards here, then we kind of went back. So are we thinking now, because I mean, as you kind of said before, it definitely makes sense because the cost per print is cheaper with these bigger machines. So are we moving things back to where we're trying to funnel most of the stuff through here, and then in turn we get rid of some of these printers that are out there and things like that as we go more paper-free, if you will, or paperless?
Right, and it was a little bit of a challenge while we had some turnover in staffing in the copy center, that it wasn't as reliable, and so I think some of the staff were, I'd rather just go ahead and do it here at the building because I know it's going to get done, you know, and we're hopeful that we have some reliable staff now that are going to be staying for a while. So, you know, at that, we would definitely like to direct it back because obviously the cheapest way to do it here.
So
in the copy center.
from a building level, do we have like the high school or the middle school or places like that? And I would assume grade school and things like that, you probably, I would assume, print more in the grade school levels, just for the fact of the smaller kids and stuff like that. Maybe I'm wrong, but do we have, I mean, at the high school and the middle school, do we have stuff in place now to where we're pushing towards, you know, printing to PDF and things like that for the students rather than printing out papers and things like that? I know we heard from several teachers that said that they try to do things with the tablet and things like that. I mean,
We have some teachers that are really trying to do, not paper aware, but really trying to do paperless. I mean, so I mean, we're in that mode. There's two things that should be happening. I mean, we should be printing less paper, given. We should be buying less paper. Let's not talk about copy counts. Let's just compare how much paper did we buy last year, how much did we buy this year. It should be less paper that we're buying. The other thing that should happen is we should be printing less in actual classrooms and even buildings.
Right.
You know, it should be, and if we do those two things, we'll be saving not just, I mean, it's nice to end up looking at this. I know we pay for less paper this year than we did last year. I know we did. So there's less money that's being put towards paper, but it could be, and it should be even less. The other thing that needs to exist is we shouldn't even have, let's not talk paper, let's talk technology. Let's talk about the printers or the copy machines themselves. Do we need all of them that exist? The answer is no.
right.
And that's what we're in the process too.
And my only question for asking that is because I guess the way I'm reading this, you know, by doing this is a 5-year agreement. So I guess I don't like the fact of being tied into this for 5 years. I would hope within 5 years that number is going to continue to do this. But with a 5-year agreement on all those devices, I assume we're stuck with paying for them for 5 years.
We do have the ability to reduce by up to 10% each year. So that was one thing that we put in there. So if we are able to decrease it, and that's one of our initiatives, then we can decrease our number of copies.
Is that all that will allow us, or is that what we set as a goal? And the only reason I ask is just 10% doesn't seem like very much as far as in reducing those, but
yeah, that's what we put in the RFP that we borrowed from another district, and that's what
Okay.
they had in it, so that's what I went ahead and went with.
sure.
Who's good in math? What is 10%?
50, well, if you did 10%, you're gonna be over 5 years, it's 50%. So you'd be.
Yeah, two machines a year is significant, I think.
But I guess my question is my understanding is we've got, at most buildings, we have a copier in the office and a copier in the library. Is that
Most, yes.
why?
Accessibility,
But I mean,
I don't know.
usually, I mean, Hayes High is our biggest building. The rest of them aren't horribly large. Could we go to one copier in each building? And if so, what is the downfall of doing? Are you going to?
Also, if they're not as accessible, they're more inclined to try alternative methods to get.
Yes.
I mean, you're gonna.
If you have to
think
walk
about
to get it.
making the copy if you have less accessibility.
Well,
to do it.
actually, when you're talking about that, as far as accessibility, I'd rather be focusing, I mean, I'm just saying, I'd rather be focusing on the printers in the classrooms than the copy machines.
Can't you just say we're
in the
done with
building.
those?
With the printers?
Yeah.
Not because of IEPs. There's different reasons that still.
So we don't have
you
printers
need-
in every classroom?
No.
Reduce printers a lot. I mean, the actual printers in classrooms, they're, if it is, it's been,
What's-
it's been approved at some point.
What's special about the IEP?
The confidentiality.
But isn't every one of the employees bound by that confidentiality? I mean, you know, I mean, it's, so if we printed it to the office or the library, one or the other, I mean, could we not have somebody that
You could have someone there, it's just, you say library, I mean, we have students that on a regular basis are getting papers off of it. I mean, it's...
Well, and I guess my question, because I think Shanna, you touched on it or I'm sorry, maybe it was Shanna. I don't remember, one of you. Somebody said about the badging to where we can do that. So with this new system, then I guess the question would be: is then are those IE printers needed anymore if we can now print to the office and they can have those badges? I guess I'm asking if there's a way we can reduce some of those in seeing some of this right off the bat.
Printing from their desk, though.
I don't know.
I mean, they could print from their laptop to that machine
Right.
too, right?
Right, and it would be held there until they went up and scanned their badge.
And that'll be the scanners or these, all of this as well.
It would be held in the queue, you mean?
Right.
To where it wouldn't even print? No.
Right, it wouldn't even print until they go up and scan their
Because
badge.
if that's the case, and I mean, I have no idea how many IEP printers we have, but I would assume technically we could eliminate all of those if that's the case.
But if you needed to have one, if that were the only reason we needed to have printers, one would be enough in the building, wouldn't it?
You mean copiers then?
Well, or not.
It would take the place of the printers.
Well, if you have all these printers, couldn't you just say, we're going to earmark this printer, we're going to put it in this person's office that is not accessible to a student, and print all IEPs to that printer until you get the, I mean, it just seems like, I mean, ink is very expensive, and printers are, that's,
And I agree with being locked into it for 5 years too, flexibility.
because and John, I know you weren't here, but 3 years ago,
Yeah, additional.
there was no guarantee on time, but 3 years ago, the plan was that we would be, the way Lance can correct me, but my understanding is that this would be, I mean, that we would already be where we're talking about going, and my concern is if you do this for 5 years, we get to the end of the 5 of it, and we're saying, well, now we're ready.
Right. Well, I guess with what you said, or what Lance said, there was a plan to do away with this center?
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I mean,
The last lease was supposed to be it.
because I know the RICO that was in there was no longer under contract, and we were just going to keep that. I was looking through my notes, and we were just going to keep that and basically do a as needed. If it needed to be fixed or whatever, we would basically go through and do that. And then once the other one fell off a contract, but I mean, I agree with what Tracy or you said. I mean, it's cheaper to print to the bigger ones as far as your per cost. But I guess that's my question: is as a district, are we going to go back that direction and phase out all the building ones, or it kind of seems like it's kind of in limbo, I
Yeah,
guess.
even at this time, I think the majority, 3/5? 3/5 is printed there of the copy. So our bigger issue, I mean, there's an issue there too, because shouldn't that be less than even that amount, possibly?
Sure.
But the 2/5 is the bigger issue. I mean, I believe the 2/5 is being printed by printers and copy machines in the buildings.
Right.
And that's an area that we want to end up decreasing even more.
And it sounds
Which-
like, I mean,
Which then allows, even with what you're saying, over the next 5 years, if we're able to decrease 10% a year, if it's one machine, if it's two machines, a year, the significance there as well of that
Why does
diminishing.
it take 5 years to get, I mean, when they told us 3 years ago that they were going to phase that out, that was news to us, or to me, because I mean, we'd always been operating with that, and so, but that was the plan, and so that was the plan, but I mean, it sounds like you're saying you think it should be the other way, that we keep that and phase out the other, right?
That's the more efficient way to print.
So if we're going to do that, if that's the new plan, why does it take so long to get rid of those others? I mean, because if you simply say, we're not buying cartridges anymore, that printer is pretty well done, isn't it? I mean, it's going to print its last page and...
And I know I wish Scott was here, I know he has all that, but we really, some printers did go away because we didn't buy any more cartridges. I mean, we were going to waste the cartridges, so once they expired, they have gone away. So if cartridges are being bought, they're probably being approved at some level, IEP, some of the things we talked about. I know we've sent the actual cost difference to staff about printing on a printer and printing on a copier. And so we have tried to educate as much as we can. What is the difference between this copy printer and like a copier at the buildings? Because they have some big machines there too. We even sent that out.
Right, and I mean, just based on the bid, with Sumner 1, it would be .009 cents at the building, .007 at the copy center.
Gotcha.
So that's the information we'll need to get out again. And really, I think Tracy hit on it. A lot of teachers would rather send it here and ship. That they've really gotten used to that. We had some turnover and times where theirs wasn't, and so it wasn't as reliable. So then I think those teachers were like, if I send it, I'm going to have to copy it. You know, we had some of that. So I think now we're at a place where we feel like we were really pushed to get as much sent here as possible.
But if you're just trying to convince them, I mean, you're always going to have those who are going to say, well, I'd rather just do it myself. And, I mean, it's...
Until we can run the numbers and say, hey, in your building this is happening, I think that's the part of that software that we didn't have.
Right, but do we need that level? You guys have already decided, you know it's cheaper to do it here. Whether we do it there or here doesn't better educate our students. And if it's cheaper here, that money we save does, or potentially could better educate our students. So it would just seem that we would have a management decision say, this is what we're doing, and yes, there might be ruffled feathers over it, and maybe it's over a year, but maybe it's too late to do it this year, but we get into a one-year lease, and then at the end of next year, it's just everything's done here, here's the timeline. Because one of the things that was brought up last time was, well, if we did something like that, then, you know, there's a big rush of things that come in, like right before school, and so they're real busy here, and so we discussed, well, could you then, you just backdate your calendar and you just tell people it's got to be in by this date if you want it by this date. And that first time, you're going to have people that don't hit the deadline and then find out that it can't be done on time, potentially.
I do believe a shorter lease, though, would increase our costs, because for them to bring in machines, new or newly manufactured, is going to be a cost for the company. So I do believe if we went with a shorter lease, that it would be a higher per copy cost.
But you would, I mean, even if you knew that that's where you were headed, you could say, we're going to cut half the machines and maybe make sure we have a printer for the IEPs if that's something we have to do or there's no other way to do it. And what's it cost to keep the used machines we have for another year? Or look at a used machine on a one-year lease. Or, I mean, if we think that they're just that bad and a new lease, I mean, to me, those are just things that, it just seems like we're not being efficient with our money to some degree, and that if we say, even if it's $30,000 a year, that's $30,000 more to
I mean,
whatever.
the used machines are what we have right now, and we're spending $65,000 on them. So, you know, I don't know what it would look like.
I think you'd have to cut, I mean, you're not going to save unless you cut back the number as well.
Is it possible to use, I don't know what kind of machines we have at the schools, but if we're going to use this, that we're printing here more, smaller copiers are less expensive. Because I'm looking at, we have 10 buildings, did you say?
I think that's the number.
10 buildings, we have 23 copiers, so basically 2.3 copiers per building. I'm not sure that's outrageous. I can imagine a copier in the office and a copier in the library for students to use. Just saying. That doesn't seem outrageous to me to have a couple copiers per building. Maybe it is.
And you're
Maybe
correct.
it is.
You're correct
But
in the
it
fact
doesn't
as
seem
far
like
as going through, but it's goofy as it sounds. It's the opposite direction. When you get to the smaller printers and stuff like that, they're more expensive to print on
Okay.
those than they are the big ones.
All right.
But you know, like an elementary level, which is 4 of those buildings, and you've got Munger,
Well, we might not need.
you wouldn't need student, I mean,
Two
I
Munger, of course.
Right.
but why are we, I mean, students shouldn't be printing anyway. I mean, you can print a PDF and,
Right.
Oh, I agree with you. It should be one. well,
I mean, they might want
because
to.
when we say let's cut them by half in a year, I'm not sure we can do that. Maybe we cut them by a third in a year, and
something that's much more
Aggressive.
quickly than 5 years. I mean, I think you can do, I mean, I think you could say we're just going to get rid of all of them and go to this. Maybe not this, maybe 2 months ago you could have done that, but you can make it work. It's just a matter of how many feathers are going to be ruffled between now and then. And, you know, you will have people upset about this. It was like when we switched the busing, there was people upset and the sky was falling, and 2 months later you didn't hear any more complaints because people just said, well, that's how it is. And, you know, and I mean, there's probably a happy medium in there somewhere. But
While we're talking about number of copiers, can you scroll up just a pinch? Because what I'm looking at is that very last sentence on that page, and it says the agreement requires a 90% uptime rate on all copiers, along with a 4-hour service response time. So what's scaring me a little bit there is they're saying that at any given time, it's okay to have 10% of our devices down? Is that what I'm not,
Yep.
and I'm just saying.
It's
That
only
was-
2.5.
That was our wording in the RFP, not requested by the vendor. just so
Okay,
you know, so.
because as we're talking about, well, we have one in the library and one in the office, and I'm going, well, wait a minute, if it's okay with, I mean,
Yeah. Right
and
now,
a 4-hour response time is pretty good, but
Especially in this area.
right now in the copy center, I cannot say that we have a 90% uptime. We do
But
not.
as we're talking about number of devices or copiers, this is what I was looking at specifically. I mean, and I can agree with what you guys are saying with the printers, but does that need to be considered in? Because what I would not want is, oh, hey, we're down to one copier in this building, and it's been down for 3 days.
I agree, but I think the only problem you're going to run into is these RFPs already went out and people already responded to them. So the only way I think you could fix that would be to reach out to everybody and say, hey, we're changing this to 95 or 98.
You'd
Can
have
you
to send
still,
a new RFP.
or send out a new RFP? That's the only problem.
Well,
And I agree with that. Greg said 1 year. What about 3? Is 3 enough? Is that the happy medium?
Yeah, I don't know.
And I don't
Could
know.
be.
I'm just.
Can I ask one question? How many, the last discussion we had, because the last big one was to get the newer machine in the copy center, and the discussion was, we only have 1 employee in there, why do we need 2 huge production level copiers? And part of that discussion was, well, the downtime, and the one breaks down, and so we have that issue. But I still think that's a legitimate question, and if we're only going to have 1 employee, and we have a 4-hour service time, I mean, do we need, because I think that one was between $12,000 and $24,000 a year for one of those. I mean, those are the expensive ones. And so if we're only gonna have 1 employee, it seems like you could go to 1.
Do we have more than 1 employee in there now?
We do in the summer. We have 2 employees in the summer, and those machines are both running a lot at the same time, even by that 1 employee. She can send 1 job and then send another, so both machines are running frequently at the same time.
Workload might scare me. If we are decreasing in our buildings and directing everything here, I would just wonder if, not so much employee, but if it could handle, if 1 machine could handle that workload.
Do we have any grasp on what those 5 million copies are? Or, the majority of it, or?
that's the piece where I'll just share feelings as far as what I have. My feelings was I was excited to come and say $13,000 less than what we've been paying on it. Okay, I thought that would be good news. I also was really delighted that we're spending less money on paper than what we've been too. So again, good news. I also thought that the good news was we're finally going to get what we've been wanting for a couple of years, I understand, about software, because the last time we've been getting the counts, it sounds like it was Sarah doing the manual of going to the buildings of having to actually,
Should just be a report.
you'd have to go into each building and try to get the manual count of
Just to the machine?
of each
They
of
would
the
have to send me
machines.
their machines report, and I would have to track it by user, and I would have to do the 3.
You could do it by
And-
report, you didn't have to make,
But I had to manually
You had to pull it
manipulate
all
that
in
and add it
together.
from each machine.
But at the end, the excitement of this software is what I was explained to was this software isn't just the copier machines at the building or the copier machines here. It's also the printers, So everything that's going to be printing off, unless of course it's not on network and it's actually just directly wired into the computer, which I don't even know if we have any of that at this time. I think everything's connected to the network. We'd be able to identify what the print, how many prints are being printed at that time. The information, the question to your answer, I'm sorry, Greg, would be not so much, as far as we don't. So I thought we had good information to share, and also information that really led us to. I'm just fine altogether if we can do without a copy machine or 2 at the end of this, next year. If the year after that we can do without another 1 or 2. But I wasn't ever in my mind with the idea of getting rid of the machines over here, because I thought that would be that was the hub of it, that was the efficient
And I
part.
agree, and that, I guess that's
Yeah.
the reason, because originally though, like I said several years ago, I
Yeah.
think that was the goal. So I mean, I'm completely fine. I mean, it makes sense because it's cheaper per copy
Well,
over there to
and,
do
and
that.
I don't think we have the reports to identify, I'll just give an example. This isn't different than a little district, okay, and maybe that's unfair to go back to the district I was at before, but it was an issue there too of identifying how do we end up getting less prints, okay? And it's the same idea, get rid of those printers in the classrooms, have the, try to end up getting it flowing through the bigger the machines in the building. The issue with it was a matter of we had the software. We were doing the count of identifying how many prints were being made on a monthly basis, even weekly basis at the elementary, at the middle school, at the high school. And then we even had the breakdown of the individual teachers too. And what was amazing with that information that we had, I don't know how to explain it, but when one teacher at an elementary is printing 10 times as much as the next one, you've got a conversation.
And I can explain
you got
some of
something
that.
to.
You'll frequently have one teacher per grade level doing the copies for all of the classes
Well,
within
there's
that
the
grade.
conversation to find that out.
Yeah.
But if that's not the case, if you find out that one is printing that much and it's just for them,
But
what is happening there?
whatever tracking system you have, you can't allow that, because then it makes you have to go, if you just simply say each teacher has to submit theirs with their code or badge,
Well,
then you don't have somebody trying to chase everybody down and find out why these anomalies are happening, if you just put policy in place that says that's how it works.
Well, it's not just policy. What's nice about this software, you can set the print number. You can only have this many prints a week or this many
I think
prints
the
a month.
machines you have now, you can do that.
Okay.
No.
No, and I appreciate the fact, like, it sounds like we're at least trying to move in the right direction on that, so I appreciate the fact, and like I said, the only thing I didn't like is, like I said, just I'm not a fan of the 5 years being tied to that. I would definitely, like I said, just because I'd like to see it a little bit more aggressive as far as going to there. And I do like the fact of moving it back towards here, because, I mean, to me, that makes sense. Like I said, I know previously it was kind of going away from that, and we were doing, and I think that's the reason a lot of those additional printers and that popped up in the buildings, like you said, but with the turnover here and the other stuff, and I think it was not focused on as much, so I think everybody's sort of saying, well, heck, I'll just print it in my building then and go from there. So yeah, I mean, to me, it makes sense to actually print here and the other stuff. Like I said, I'm not a fan of the 5 years, I guess, so.
Sure, and I guess I'll repeat, I did send this to the board, so all of you are aware of this, but for everybody to know, because of my personal request of having a change in the June board meeting, it sets the stage of then perhaps a short special board meeting to act on this early in June, because June 25th, I think, is June 25th would be too late to try to get this all turned over by July 1st. I'm sorry?
We just have one meeting in June.
So,
We only had
Well,
one
I think,
plan.
in my opinion, I think this is a pretty good plan. I think Tracy mentioned that we can reduce the number of copiers or the number of paper, the amount of paper by 10% per year.
Right.
We can actually be diligent about this and actually have John and his team work to reduce the number of copiers or paper, whatever, by 10% per year.
Well, John,
I say go for it.
I do think we've probably identified a board goal for retreat. I have a feeling this might come up again.
I've heard a lot that we talked about this before and it hasn't happened. Well, it's our job to make sure that we stay on task and make sure they stay on task. So 5 years, we're in the same boat, then
But in 5 years, how many of us will still be on this board?
Well,
That's the concern.
I understand, yes, I understand that. But
That's been one of the
I think it's
problems.
almost a dodge for us to say, well, why aren't you guys doing it? I think we need to be responsible too. And I think if we could reduce the number by 10% per year, that's not a bad goal.
I need a little extra clarity, and I apologize. that bid number, that includes the prints, or that is for the machines, and then what we print out will be an extra cost?
That includes everything, the machines, everything but paper.
But the physical paper
Right.
and ink?
It covers the ink.
That's all part of it?
Yeah, repair,
If
service,
it goes over those
everything.
numbers, then it's on that sheet. Yeah, there's the account numbers, what they bid, and if it goes over that, then you pay per copy, whatever that number is.
Right.
And they do meter reads, and I assume you have to send those in still?
Right.
Right.
John, you had made the comment with, as far as whenever we vote on this, you're saying from a time standpoint that doesn't, if we, because I know you said with moving the meeting.
Well, I was saying that June 17th, when Tracy and I talked about this, felt like it was really tight to end up removing machines that exist and getting new machines in place by July 1st. If it's pushed back even another week, being the 25th, really say that's not going to happen. And so that's why I was saying that an earlier special board meeting would end up making this very doable of the changeover.
Is there a reason and I'm just asking, is there a reason it has to be done by July 1st?
That's when our contracts end, so our copiers will be pulled July 1st.
And we want to have,
Okay. But are a lot of those over the summertime in the, I mean, I can understand these, but are a lot of those really being used? And I'm just asking just because, I mean, if it would make it easier, like I said, rather than doing the other, I mean, I didn't know if we had to do a specific date.
Well, the RFP did say, I mean, as one of the requirements that we would have the board vote on it on June 18th, and then had a certain time frame. I believe it's around July 15th that we said we wanted the copy center installed and our operators trained, and then by the end of July, trained and in the buildings for our building staff.
What type of copies were we running between June 18th and mid-July?
it's busy here.
Well, that's what, I mean, some of them may not be an issue if there's no students or people in the building, but some of them might.
I'm fine with whatever. I just figured if it helps you guys out, if it makes a difference, so.
I had stated that because I sure didn't want to, the awkwardness of ever coming and saying, really like you to vote on this in the first time you saw it, that's never
Right.
good. So the other option was just a matter of saying, and I don't like having special board meetings, but I can assure you that it probably wouldn't be that long.
I have a question for Greg. If we didn't vote on it tonight, what additional information would you like to see specifically? Because if they have to go back through the bid request, is there even time?
I don't know if there is time.
That's what I mean.
That's
Is
my
there
concern
any
with it is. Well, there is, but it just
vote on
is,
tonight or June 18th?
you need probably, how long to do an
From June
RFP?
18th to June 25th, so they're
Oh,
saying
that's
there's not
right.
enough
Okay,
time.
okay, yeah. So we technically, you're saying we
He's
do
needing a
technically need to vote on
or
it
a
tonight?
special board meeting.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
But what I'm asking is, if we said, no, we're not voting on it tonight, what are you wanting to see? Or is there even ability of Tracy to get a different request between now and whenever that special board meeting or whatever would be?
I don't know, I mean, I'd have to ask them how long an RFP would take. I mean, because what you have right now, you can't pick and choose the way this RFP's written up, correct?
Right. I mean, they've responded to what we requested
Right.
of them.
Now, you could go back to all of them and ask them if they would honor
And that time, that takes,
the pick and choose.
I would assume with it being May 21st, that'd be awful quick turnaround time.
And I'm not to say that, once we start working with a new vendor, that they wouldn't work with us on if we are able to reduce more copiers. I'd have to ask them, on how they would.
So we basically said, we want to be able to tone it down by 10% each year. There's nothing in this RFP that states that we're penalized for going less than that? Like if we decide to do
I believe it
15 or
says-
20%?
I
or
believe
it
it says
is?
a maximum because they
Okay.
are investing in the
Okay.
machines.
Okay.
Do we have is it going to be, the savings going to be based upon their bid, or what's it say the savings are if we reduce by 10%?
It'd be the number of copies that would drive
Okay.
that.
So we would still continue to pay the listed on there, but we could still reduce that by 10%? Okay.
Okay, if it's just copies,
yeah, we're not gaining anything then.
well, the way we're gaining is less prints. I mean,
Paper, but we're-
whether you have 25 copy machines or you have 10.
Right, that's true.
If you're basing it upon just how many prints.
But I don't think that's how it's set up. It's set up on a dollar figure, and that's the cost per print at that number of prints, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not,
And then we can
It's
have
not per
an
machine.
underage- We can have an underage of 10% each year and readjust that by 10%.
but would they discount 10% off the lease price the next year, or would they,
We
or
would
is it
pay-
just,
We would pay for those those fewer copies, yes. And I honestly, if our initiative is to reduce the amount of printers and push them to the copiers, we're gonna see our copy numbers go up.
Sure.
As we take out those printers, for a while, so.
Well, but again, what I'm saying is the issue is trying to end up getting so we have less prints. I mean, that's the baseline altogether. You want to go from 5 million to 3 million copies. You want to cut it down, and that's the base. And I follow what you're saying. It'd be nice to go from 25 to 18 copy machines. But if you're still printing the same number of copies on 18 as you were 25, you're still not, you're not really answering the issue.
no, you're not. That's why you've got to stop the number of copies,
Yeah.
too.
But that's where I thought, I mean, that's where I was optimistic coming into the meeting was we are paying for less paper this year than we did. It appears that we are succeeding in that and having the tools to work on that to cut that down more, we should make a concerted effort to do that. I mean, that should be part of the process.
When do we do our paper bid? Is that in July?
Yes, we do them usually, a couple of years ago, we started doing them actually twice a year because we were hopeful that we were reducing enough that we didn't want to buy a massive amount. So yes, in the summer and then again, late in the year, early spring, early beginning of the year.
Do we have a price per page we pay for that?
I don't know that offhand. I can get it for you, though.
Very good. Any further discussion from anybody?
So.
It sounds like they need a
They need a vote.
they need
or
a
we
vote tonight.
special meeting, right?
Or a special meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a fan of special meetings. And if we're not going to have any additional information beyond what we have today or changes, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion to approve the bid as presented.
Okay. Been moved by Board Member Fox,
Second.
seconded by Board Member Young. I guess we did this backwards, but any further discussion?
I do agree with a lot of the comments that Greg is saying, and I am serious that I do think maybe this is something we need to continue to work on as a board goal.
I'm like, just
continue to
shut the copiers
reduce
off at a
paper
certain
and reduce
point.
number of machines.
Just take them away.
It is a mindset to print less.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And do we recycle? Is there any recycling initiatives in our district? Like, is that the
Yeah.
mindset that we have is to conserve like that?
We actually use backsides or things that we write on, we save that, we have recycling bins, so. It's definitely worth revisiting. We have a lot of turnover in staff. The last couple of years, we had a lot of turnover in administration, so I know I made a note to add this to the admin agenda we're having, in the next week or so. So, yes, so we have.
Well, I think you guys brought great news with this bid being less than the previous printers to tell us that we've printed on less paper and everything like that. So I think it's all good news.
Yeah.
I would add one additional comment, just in light of the recent discussion with the technology in this. And I don't know how the RFPs look or what your options are when you do an RFP. So this is naivety on my part, but it seems like we get one option when they come back there's different people who've given you a bid based on the one request, but is there a way to do the request for, we would like to see a bid for this option, a bid for this option, and a bid for this option from all of these people? Because then, like, if we said a 1-year lease or this many machines or something,
Right.
same thing happened with the Hayes High device discussion, is we had one choice we were discussing at that point. So that would just be my request, is that we have more options to look at.
Right,
Good
we're
call.
not going to say unless you shoot another option, but we don't know what other options.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's when we come back, and then Greg has all these questions, or I have questions, and and then you're like, okay, we have to go back through the process again. So if we could start the process with a couple different scenarios to begin with.
And yeah, because I agree, because like I said, I support the other deal. I don't really care for the 5 years, so I would love to see less than that, but at this point, it's not really an option, just being the time crunch, so.
Well, and I was going to bring this up at the end on that issue because we discussed shortly after Lance got on the board, I can't remember when that was, but when we changed the whole agenda process, and you know, it used to be that the agendas came out at no less than, they had to be out a week before, nothing got added to the agenda after that. So everything that was going to be brought up, other than personnel transactions, was in that. So the board had a week to look at it. If any issues came up, we could ask them. That's one of the reasons we did work sessions, so they were coming up. But you know, what we had a lot is stuff like this, where we're coming here at the end of May and we have a technology lease that's, we've got a month to do something on, when, I mean, we know that, we knew 3 years ago that this date was the date that it was going to come up, so that and then when you look at the options, not only do we have options, but what are the positives and negatives of each option? And, you know, if we act and we then don't like it later, we can go back and look at the minutes and say, or the agenda and say, well, you know, it was laid out there for us, and we knew which direction we were going. We knew the downfalls of taking that course of action, but we chose it anyway. And that's, I mean, it seems to be a protection for staff as well. But
I will take full responsibility for bringing this to you this late in the year. I didn't ever dream it was going to take me as long to get this RFP together as it did. So it was completely on me that the time ran so short here at the end.
I did have one more. The bid, there was 2 options on it, and I just want to make sure, are we bidding on option 2 that includes the card readers?
Sorry, let's get back to that page.
On the cover sheet, option 2,
Yes, I think so.
that would be if you selected a different company.
Oh, wait, no,
other
no,
than
not
Sumner
that.
One.
On
There's 2
the bid
option
sheet
twos.
itself, it's like on page 53 at the very bottom of the bid.
I think
Unless I'm looking at the completely wrong
I think the one that they are,
Am I looking at the wrong thing? This is.
Yeah,
Sumner
that's, the
One
software and
copiers.
card readers are separate. This is just the copiers, yes.
This is, right?
That's your attachment.
Right?
Yeah.
That's correct, right? Am I on the right bid?
Yeah.
Okay, well then on the one at the bottom, they give us 2 options. One is for card readers and then one is for not, and we're wanting the card readers. So I just want to make sure that we are.
she's saying the software and the card readers are separate of this.
Oh,
correct.
so that's just like a separate
Yes.
price?
So maybe you'd have to amend, or you'd have to do a separate motion.
Interesting.
I believe
Other
so.
products, options for consideration. I guess I should have read the headline at the top of that paper. So when would we consider card readers if we're wanting to do that?
We want to implement them as soon as possible when the school starts.
So then this financial consideration is not correct, it's on the sheet, on the,
I really I don't know how to put those numbers together because there's the purchase price, 5-year lease,
Let me see.
adding 25 card readers.
I have their bid right here.
It's like up to 500 users, so I don't really know like how many people would be using it, if there's a limit on that, and then if we should be bidding that with the printer or not, if we want to implement the card reader.
Well, there's the other time, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
We might just spend our $13,000 savings.
Well,
I don't see it, I don't know.
Maybe you do 500 users? And then it's-
Because that'll obviously make a difference in the,
Well, that's
Yeah,
probably
price.
by
$13,000
printers that you put the card readers on, I assume.
You can't put 500 times that would be 100,000. You must have divided it by
Embedded
5 years.
in 25.
Closer.
How many users would be using the card readers? Like every staff or?
I think it would be 1 card reader per machine.
You need the reader per machine, but you need cards for everybody.
Yeah.
Cards, we all have our ID
We
cards.
use these
How
cards,
much staff do we have? What's our staff number?
650 probably.
but with cards that we
So
can use.
if we
Yeah,
use
that
the,
would
if we go
be-
with the card readers for this, not every staff, there'd be like over
they can
100
use their
staff
existing
members. that
badges,
can't-
he said.
We'd have to pay for.
But there's a per user.
But I
Right, we
imagine
don't-
Paras probably don't.
We
do
wouldn't
this.
have everybody
Go
having
for it. It's on
access
that
to it.
attachment.
The Sumner?
It's at the end.
And I know Scott did say that we used to have a contract with Paper Cut, and that he was looking into seeing what that would give us as a discount, so we're doing some more research on that.
Not really understand the numbers on it either.
Well, it would seem to me, and I know there's a motion and a second, but it seems like with this, I guess I'll keep quiet. I'm probably a no vote either way, so I don't want to be forcing a table. I guess if you guys that are going to support it think that, but it just, I thought that number was included in there.
No, that's a good point.
Do you know where I'm looking at?
You're looking on the attachments on the website, right?
It's on the last
Yeah.
page, right?
Yeah, I don't understand the numbers there. Yeah. That purchase price, and then it says the 5-year lease costs. I don't know if you would add under option 2.
You're going to add another 5.
All those numbers together?
It does still only go 34,000.
I don't know.
I was just trying to come up with a way to multiply and come up with the number.
Honestly, I would like to, approve it with the card readers, the bid.
Yeah, but the
What is the
financial
cost for that, though?
consideration on the cover sheet is
Is incorrect.
not correct.
Okay.
Maybe it is, but none of it makes sense how you got there.
And you're saying on there, Tracy, you're not sure if that includes the card readers?
I believe that the card readers would be purchased with the software.
So in addition to the 52,000, correct?
I believe so.
Oh, that's probably for
Okay.
specialty printing.
So there would be another, well,
The
I guess,
digital software cost, right. that
yeah, on top of
We're
that.
hoping to get lower than what they're saying because we did have
Okay.
a license with them earlier, but
Well,
that's
that's what you
we're-
mentioned, what was it called again?
Paper Cut?
Paper Cut, that's the software for the company.
Okay, well, we do have a motion and a second on the table to accept that. So if nobody has any further discussion or questions on that, I will go ahead and call those for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Can I get a raise of hands for? So 4 to 2. Okay, so motion fails 4 to 2.
And I guess it's just, it's not that I'm against this, I just want to make sure
Yeah,
the
make
dollar
sure the-
amounts are
the-
sorted
the-
out. And I agree with Mandy, I'm not nuts about a special meeting, because I'm going to be gone for a week, but if I have to call in
Yeah.
or something, I'll help with that and make that work. So,
We can just make Paul do it since he missed it.
yes, let's nominate Paul for that. I would definitely support the
I just want to make sure
the
that
proposal.
savings
I
are
just
still
want to
in-
know what the actual dollar amounts are. And if it doesn't, if this is, and I agree with Sophie, I want to add this in there. And I just want to see what that actual amount is before I say yes or no.
Could be. I don't know. Add that on there maybe.
Wait, was that option 2 including the software you guys were talking about, or was that also separate?
That's separate, it said. I think that's what she said, so.
All right.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the approval of school fees.
I'd move to approve the, leaving the school fees at $90 and the other fees as provided.
Okay, been moved by Board Member Schwartz,
Second.
seconded by Board Member O'Borney. Any further discussion? The only question I had, John, on the other stuff, because I know last year we moved it, I think, from like 130, 135, I think, down to 90. Is that something, are we continuing to evaluate that each year and find out if that's, because I think even at 90, maybe I'm wrong, 90 is still
We're-
higher.
We would
than-
consider to lower that. It was not, it's just other things we were trying to do this year, it didn't
Okay.
fit in.
Okay.
It'll be considered next year as well to be less than that.
Very good.
And the
Okay.
5 cent was based upon increases that sometimes have to, with the.
And there, we're required by the state with that, aren't we? And instead of probably going through and doing increase here and an increase here and an increase here, she can just do it all in one fell swoop, basically,
Right.
and cover it. Okay. Huh?
We're talking about
The
school
lunch, yeah, for 5 cents.
I had a couple questions on driver's ed. Is that still self-sufficient?
It is.
And that was already approved at a prior meeting for this year.
There we go, right there, February. The $90, is that used for, is that where, that list over there, that's what that's, is that what that's used for, or it's to the right of that is what each one's used for?
To the right of that, the work and material fee is what we use for all classroom supplies, athletic supplies, our library books, textbooks that we're saving for.
Very good. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is the Kansas Association of School Boards, KASB renewal.
I've moved to renew the membership with KASB with the Legal Assistance Fund in the amounts of $11,516.52 and $2,100 respectively for the 2018-19 school year.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Board Member Schwartz and seconded by Board Member Fox. Any further discussion? The only question I have is, looking on that, it shows on the other one we have 11,516, and then it shows the season pass optional of 1,500.
Yeah,
Is that different than looking on the deal here? Because we have, it shows 2,100.
No, the season pass is different.
Okay, but that's
The
included
season
in.
pass lets all board members and staff go to meetings.
It gives you an option for much more in-service, from KSB. And,
Okay.
and I don't feel we utilize it to the degree that it's worth doing that.
Okay, so we would just subtract, I guess that shows
Right.
optional, but it's included on the invoice, so we would just, we're not doing the
not
optional
doing
piece.
that.
Okay, that's
Now, I'm all for it if that would change in the next year, because it does open up the door for, it's a very good deal. But in our particular case, we have a board that does not have retirees, or really open schedules of being able to go to a lot of the workshops. And so
Gotcha.
it's,
And that's basically what you're paying
there
for.
are some districts where you have board members that go to a handful of them a year.
Okay.
And it gets expensive if you don't have this
Have the-
pass.
So I've been to a couple of these meetings. Do you have to pay extra fees because I go to those, or?
Well, there's a, there's a charge for any time you
Well, I assume it
attend.
was, but I mean, it's not, hopefully not $1,500.
No, it's going to be in that, but it could be $90, it could be,
You've analyzed it with as far as what you go to, what the board goes to, and we're not hitting $1,500 yet.
No.
So if we do, we can maybe look at it next year.
Yeah, Mike, I would say don't not go because we pay, but when that becomes the more affordable, then that's what we would look
Gotcha,
at.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
Okay.
But I did see that there is some stuff in Hayes coming up, it looks like.
right.
Yeah, they,
Nice.
Well, it's not, and that's for board clerk is one of them that's here, but again, some of these things are set up where it's not just for board members, it's also for, the Rockwell personnel would end up going to. And some of it's appropriate, especially if it's new personnel. But if you have personnel in the place for several years, it's not necessarily needed to go to it. So.
Very good. Well, I think we have a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is the 2018-2019 board meeting calendar.
I move to approve the board calendar as presented.
Second.
Okay, been moved by Board Member Schwartz and seconded by Board Member Fox. Any further discussion?
I only want to point out, you do recognize the 3 months that has one board meeting. That was, and that was directed. I mean, I don't feel that was just us. I think we were gathering that from board members that that's okay.
And that was the only thing I was going to just ask on that is just, do you guys feel that that's still adequate as far as to cover that?
I do.
That was just my only concern.
I still, now here we have a case of June, of just what's coming up here. So but again, there's a big difference from one item versus a full agenda.
But I've said in the past, I'd meet weekly if need be, so that's, it's just nice to know, but, or every other week, but the concern is, we had the the marathon meeting on the 29th, and we're heading that direction tonight because we're moving along, but we still have a big item coming up, it looks like. So, you know, it might be beneficial on some of those to meet more frequently but shorter versus less frequently and longer.
Okay, do we have a, I don't think anybody's motioned it yet, have we?
Yeah.
Did they? Oh, maybe I did.
Yep.
Okay,
Greg
never
and I
mind.
are on it.
Never mind. So we have a motion on the second on the table. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is the 2018-2019 school year calendar.
I'd move to approve the 2018-19 school calendar as presented.
Okay, been moved by Board Member Schwartz,
Second.
seconded by Board Member Young. Any further discussion?
This year, I think spring break was early.
Yeah, we had this, they do it with, I asked this question the last time too, is they try to stay consistent with Fort Hays, and for whatever reason, Fort Hays has changed theirs this year.
But next year it is early too.
I don't know, I don't like that school gets, like, I don't like the school gets out as early as it does.
Well,
We
they
start
would
early
start
as we
earlier
do.
too. It
I
used to
know.
be we started later and got out a week later, and that was my next question is if there's a reason for that. I mean, there is a committee that approves this, right?
Yes,
Do we know what the reasons, I mean, is Fort Hays the reason for spring break?
yes.
Yeah.
We align it. It was actually later this year. The next year's back to where it used to be.
It's the 11th through the 15th. Usually it's,
But this year it was like 17 through 20.
oh, it has.
Oh.
It was
This
late.
year
Okay.
it seemed late. I mean, I didn't mind it, but I do know we had that feedback. But we do get the calendar through Fort Hays and align with area schools.
Do we coordinate with them before they set theirs?
No,
Oh, gosh,
They just set theirs regardless of what we say?
Would be really nice.
correct.
Well,
No.
their staff, if we set ours when we set it, their staff has a bigger problem with it than our staff does.
No, they said it. It's,
But the reason we do it is because their staff have kids in the district, right?
well, that partially, yes.
That cuts both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, that, but our students.
They did it first, I guess.
They can go first.
I really hate how early we start and how early we get out.
I've heard a lot of complaints, but it was,
Yeah.
I've heard a complaint about that too,
Yeah.
about us starting early.
Oh,
But it
yeah.
was like a complaint due to the heat, thinking that we could save money by not running so much air conditioning.
And you will hear, we have some on the committee, we talk about this a lot, that the start later and add minutes to the day, but we've talked, and instructionally, that doesn't help. I mean, unless you're gonna add days to the calendar, adding 5 minutes a day doesn't, and cutting days.
Oh, no, I would agree with that.
Cutting, they're just talking add minutes and start later, and we've talked and agreed that best practice would say that's not instructionally.
are they doing that to shorten the year?
Right, to push the start date back.
Oh.
I know you're saying push the start date and extend it.
Well-
Then we have graduation with TM, I mean, there's a lot to consider about when we end and why we end when we do as far as with the calendar. But we've talked about adding minutes and cutting days is not the best use of instructional time. So we're kind of laying where we're at.
I thought about this, and I was going to bring it up, but now you said something, so I'm going to.
Go, Shannon.
I read some articles here recently. We've discussed this previously, but we talked about the 4-day week, and we talked about the year-round calendar. But Colorado, there's a huge push out there that they're going to that 4-day week, and you know it's.
But they also have legalized marijuana, Greg.
And Kansas last week took the first step to legalize hemp, and that we're heading in that same direction. So.
Here, I don't know if it's.
But we're not, there's Bird City, I think, is on a 4-day week. I mean,
Tacoma might be looking at that too.
but there was savings to be realized on that. And there was, you know, a lot of valid concerns about daycares and things like that. But, you know,
There are a few
Was that
districts in the
year-round?
state that are doing that.
well, there's two teachers, when we last talked about it, at the middle school, had created a year-round calendar that added no additional days to the calendar, just spread it out, and that's floating around somewhere.
I really think with the whole redesign idea and look at best practice, you won't see some different variations in school
Calendars.
calendars moving forward. What does make most sense,
Well, if you look-
late starts and.
3 months off is not good for the
year-round
kids.
And not having, and that's why we're excited about the summer program. We're offering through June and through migrant dollars, we got a grant. We're hoping to do a jump start for kids. We know there is that summer slide. So we're trying to implement some things, but I would think with redesign, there'll be more and more of that looked at.
Okay.
But this is, where we're at for this year from the
Okay.
committee.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is the rescheduling of the June 18th board meeting. And I think we just need to vote to approve the postponing of June 18th board meeting to June 25th at the same time.
I'd move the June 18th meeting to June 25th at 6:30 at the same location.
Okay, been moved by Board Member Schwartz,
Second.
seconded by Board Member Fox. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is the long-range facilities planning.
We're in trouble now.
I thought I'd do it this way. I wanted to end up sharing from the standpoint of, over the last 2 years that I have been here, especially since November when we had the last bond election, it's been a matter of trying to gather information. We've had changes that's happened, for sure. Actually, 3 changes with board members just in the last months has had some of this, as far as trying to end up sharing information and putting this together. We've had input from committee members, we've had input from community people, we've had suggestions from professional organizations such as architectural firms, construction manager at risk. All of that comes together, so it's not my idea. I've tried to put this together, a lot of people's ideas, with what I'm sharing this evening. But this is coming out as much as a recommendation, as much as anything, so we can maybe move ahead. And when I say move ahead, it was brought up earlier today, and I've had those discussions too, of individuals realizing when you become a board member, you're a board member usually for 4 years, sometimes 2 years. You end up having a case where here, this set of board members, we have 4 of you in less than 2 years that are going to be up for vote again. I mean, there's a possibility of 4 different board members. And if not 4, 3, 2. We have change that occurs quite quickly. The issue of putting things off sometimes isn't the best decision. Sometimes it's a matter of really trying to end up looking at it and making the best decisions and working with that. And I think that's what we've been trying to do. You've really addressed it in many different ways. One ends up being money. The issue there is just saying, okay, we did do a survey. This is the information that came back. That was addressed many different times from many different groups of saying, okay, the 50-some% of the people said not more than $10. Okay? Now there was another group, but it was 10 to 20, okay? And that percent was there as well. So what number are we looking at? If you end up saying $10, and you end up saying 10 years, because we did end up addressing the issue of 30 years was too long. I mean, we hear people say it's definitely too long. If that's the case, we cut her back to 10, you end up getting a number that's about 18.25 mil. So there you end up having, then you could end up, if you stretched it a little bit, instead of $12 for 10 years, you could end up having 22.25 mil. Or you could end up saying $10 and 15 years. And that is 24.25 mil. Or it could be $12 and 15 years, and that's 29.50 mil. Now, I'm putting that up there just so you've seen this information. It's been sent to you over the last months. The issue is just a matter of looking at this. I would say that our numbers really are 10 to $12. Okay? I'd also say somewhere around 10 to 15 years. And if you end up working that scale of just saying, okay, where is it? Is it $10, $11, $12, not more? If you end up saying this scale, it could be 11, it could be 12. It doesn't have to be a 10 or 15. It could be somewhere in between there in the process. But you are going to get a range somewhere in between 18 and 29. Because however you work that, it's going to be somewhere in between there. So I'm just saying, this seems to be a number. This seems to be the range that we're talking about, okay? Talking about as far as public supporting and saying, okay, this is something that can work, something that would be perhaps supported. The other piece that we come up with of our, I don't want to say arguing, but discussing from the standpoint of who's coming up with ideas. We've heard a variety of ideas. The last plan actually came up, the focus was elementary schools. The board has not really gone astray of that. It's still saying elementary schools is right now perhaps the focus. The issue with that is just a matter of how do we do it. It could be done different ways. It could be a new building. It could be added on to another building. It could be, but what you want to do is create a plan that gives options in the future. And when I say future, 10 years away, or 15 years away, or 11, whatever that is. So you end up having a plan that is solid enough and gives options for the future that you can end up having something planned for. And not to say that you have to have that plan set too. You know, it's not a matter of having this plan and then the next one 10 years from now. And the reason why wouldn't you say that's so important 10 years from now? Because how many of you are going to be here 10 years from now? Okay? What administration is going to be here 10 years from now? What's the economy going to be like 10 years from now?
Greg will be here 10 years.
Those are all.
I was going to raise my hand, but I thought that might be inappropriate. So
Those are all things that you have to consider as far as we do what we can do right now. And we do it as well as we can, allowing for options in the future. And that's what it should be. It should be options in the future. If you create a plan that pretty much irons it out, it cages you that you have to go this particular way 10 years from now, I don't think that's a good plan. You should be able to have something that then gives you options even in the future working from it. What I mean by that is, plus, who's to do it? I can come up with options. A committee could come up with options. You guys could come up with options. But I do believe with what discussion I have heard, it may have its benefit of saying that we end up having, maybe 4 to 5 options. And when I say that, 4 to 5 options that is working within that frame of money. And the frame of money could be, you could identify to say, we believe this is the best. It's 11.11. It's $11, it's for 11 years. I don't care what the example is. But that amount is what we're working from. And we can create 4 to 5 options that's really hitting that amount that we're working from. And these are the 4 or 5 options that exist. I believe that maybe there's benefit if there's a committee that identifies 5. Those 5, that committee then comes to the board, and the board then identifies 2 or 3 of the 5. You end up making the decision. You end up voting on those 2 or 3 options that then you end up having 1, 2 or 3, 2 or 3 options that then goes out to the public. And when I say goes out to the public, it goes out as a bond survey. We've talked about surveying. The issue there is there benefit of spending $8,000 to $14,000 to get more information from the public? Different people have different views on that. What I'm gathering from people that I've talked to, I'm hearing perhaps we have the information. We need to use the information that we've already gathered, and we need to work from it. What we need is a bond survey, and the bond survey would end up having the variety of what this option was, this option, and this option, and basically you end up saying yes or no. And you have some individuals that are going to end up, when we send it out to them, it'll come back and it'll say, no, no, no. Someone will say, yes, no, yes. But what would come back to us is, I'm certain we would find out of these three options, which one out there. And also the suggestion of saying, why would we send it to everybody who can vote? Which then makes the cost of that survey $15,000. When you could actually just send it out to the 4,000 that's been voting the last couple times. Send it to the people that are voting. The people that voted are going to be probably the people that's going to vote the next time. You send it out to 4,000 people, you probably have a price tag of around $8,000 that you could send this out, get the information back, and I think this could be done through the summer. I think by August, we could end up having the board identify, plus get this survey out, get that information back, and be able to end up working with it with an idea of which particular option do we want to end up addressing at this time. And the time frame could be a situation where, checking even today with Dustin Navy, he was saying that the time frame would work, that you could still conceivably have a January or a February election at that particular time. So I don't mean to take a lot of time. This is to set discussion at this time, but this is, if I had to kind of summarize everything that I've talked to individuals about. I have met with individuals about the survey. I did meet, Tom had, at that last meeting, he had pushed talking to Josh. I did meet with Josh last week, trying to gather information that way. He is willing to end up being on a committee and helping with that, of putting together 4 to 5 options. As to who else would be on it, that could be your determination. I'm just saying the key to this is you get 4 to 5 options, you still have the control of what are the 2 or 3 that's going out to the public. And then the public ends up having the control of which one do they like the most. And then it goes to a vote, an actual real vote, where you'd like to think that there's going to be some similarity to what that survey was, and then you get that information back when you have the bond election. So thoughts or questions about this?
I think those numbers are a lot closer to where we need to be.
Okay, so you would agree, we haven't gotten to this point, but this page, you would say the range of 18 million to 29 million is the range that we need to be looking at and working with.
Yeah, I think it's much closer than where it needs to be there. I mean, they're, or even less for that matter, but yeah, no higher than
What do you think
that.
about when you're playing with a scale of working that scale of between this dollar amount and these years, because I'm saying that will be between that 18 and 20 million when you're playing with the scale of both of those.
I think 15 years is high.
I'm sorry?
I think 15 years is high, but I think that is more right on.
Well, it still falls into what they said, smaller, more frequent. I mean, it's still half of 30. I'm not.
But it's a generation.
It
And
is.
if you're a kindergartner,
Right.
the next step is you're not going to realize.
Well, and I'm not going to lie, if you were asking me to vote tonight, I'd take the 12 for 10. That's just, and I think that gets us a new elementary school. So your second up, your second up on your 12 for 10 gets you about 22. Wasn't a new school somewhere in the range of 21, 22?
Something like that.
So, to me, I'm looking at one new elementary school.
One option,
But
one
how
of
many
those options
sections
could
is
be a
that?
new elementary. One
Yeah,
option.
good question.
I mean, my concern with this is, I think this is further down the road. I don't have, none of that, I think 15, I agree with Sophia, it's way too long. I would be talking 5 to 10, personally. So you asked several questions. Who's the committee? How does it formed? What's their task? Generally, if you're going to form a committee, you're going to assign them something. And I spent a lengthy amount of time on Saturday talking to one of the vision team members. I didn't, after that whole process I didn't participate in, so I feel like I got a whole lot more insight from that. But one of the things that, I mean, the options that they talked about appeared to me to be the identical options the Facility Needs Committee talked about. It's just a matter of how they got there, and so, you know, the options are out there. I don't think, I mean, we've kind of talked around them here. I mean, so the question becomes to me, what is I mean, the board has to just make a decision. And we've done a lot of talking, but I think now it's time to form, you know, if we're going to have these meetings, we need to have an agenda that says we're going to talk about, that we have 1 to 4 elementary schools. That's probably step one of any process, I think. And to really make an educated decision on that as a board, we can talk about Atchison and other districts that have done it, but until we get the numbers to show if we go to 1, here's what it's going to be, if we go to 2, here's what it's going to be, 3 and 4, you know, what financial savings, if any, are there district-wide? What are the positive, just like we talked about options on our agenda. If we go with 1, what are, you know, one of the things, you've got better collaboration, but you've got a con is the community's probably not going to buy it.
And you caught me on that, because I did neglect to identify that. In our conversations, I was with the field that our conversations was identifying that 4 elementaries is too many.
But we talked around that, but we've never voted or said that. I mean, I think if we voted, we would say that, but we haven't.
And also, that 1, even though we feel that there's benefits to that, perhaps, did not believe the community would actually get behind that and support it. From all the time I've been here, from last year and this year, I'm still with the thought, I'm hearing that most people are thinking that 2 or 3 is really the answer. It's 2 or 3. Whatever this option, when I was talking about these options here, these options here need to have that in mind, that it ends up allowing for that decision of 2 or 3. Because we're not going to make a change. There's not going to be the money. I don't believe there's the money here to end up taking care of that. What I'm saying is, you can't, with this money, make a 1-building elementary. You can't even arrange for a 2-building.
But if you...
A 2-building elementary. You can't do that with this.
But isn't the difference between 2 and 3 substantial? I mean, what if, you know, where if we go with 3, where would those be?
Well, again, probably largely where I mean, Roosevelt is set.
Yeah.
Wilson, the location there, even with the last plan, was still placing a school in that location. And the third one would be the question mark. It was at the last election, it still is somewhat of a question.
But what do you, I mean, I think that becomes that was a big problem I saw at the last bond is, you know, where it's at, what it looks like. But if you have that, then maybe we can iron that out. But then, are they all 3 same level? I mean, if we have 12 sections, are they 3-4 sections, or is there a 6 section? And because I mean, if you're making a long-range plan, I don't think you would ever plan to have 3 dissimilar-sized schools. You would have 3 the same, or 2 the same. Because if not, a lot of people are going to like to go to the smaller school, you know, just because it sounds better. But so I mean, I think those are some of the things that if you don't have those ironed out, it just creates options for those that are against it to start creating obstacles before we even got started and started talking to anybody about it.
Okay. Well, then it'd be a matter of the board identifying what's the outline to give for those options, so that those 5 options they come up with are within the scope of saying, is the board agreeable that whatever the options are, we're working towards a 2 elementary school district, or a 3, you know, which one is it? Or if they could actually have maybe 1 of that or 2 of the 5 options is something that can be done now that allows for either a 2 or 3 10 years from now. I mean, it doesn't block you off of really making it one way or another there, because who knows what population could even do, you know, in 10 years. So I would say that's one that can end up being done. You're right. It should, maybe the board wants to identify just what you just said. At the most, it's 10 years. You know, it's not, 15 is not even a consideration. It's got to be 10. You know, you identify you identify with the dollar amount, basically. You know, out of the board itself, it's not a matter for the committee to do that. You're identifying, saying it's going to be this many dollars and this many years, and that's it. Because if you're saying 10 years, actually you'd be rolling around. I would like to think that whoever's around 7 years from now is probably going to be in the process of starting to work with what is the next plan of spinning off of that 10-year process of what that next step is going to be. But even 7 years gives you that time of determining what changes have happened in the community and where we're at that point to make that determination.
The last point I didn't make was, at what point do we come up with a long-range or strategic plan? You know, it seems like we're jumping ahead, and I don't want to delay this, and I don't want to belabor it either, but it seems like that strategic plan, or the long-range plan, strategic is probably not the right word, but a longer-range facility plan, somebody's got to make that decision at some point. And so the ways I know to do it are you either hire somebody that does that professionally and works with the community, the district, and whatnot to come up with that plan, or the board makes that decision.
Okay, when you're talking about that strategic plan, are you talking about the facilities themselves as to what we're going to do with them over the next 20 years?
I'm only focusing on facilities. A true strategic plan would have other things tied to it as well.
Right, but are you? I didn't know if it was the maintenance or actually the setting of the buildings, as far as which ones are going to be utilized and what the plan is there. And
You have to start with the buildings first before you can do any of the rest of that. But yes.
Well, the reason why I say that is because for you to, one of the discussions we ended up having was the idea of, well, maybe in the future, right now it's not going to work, but maybe in the future, maybe 10 years from now, things will be in good shape where there can be the consideration where the public would actually go, maybe a new high school, and maybe the middle school would then be converted into a large elementary. I mean, that has been talked about. That was actually stated. The issue there is just a matter of saying, to create an option here and work from the option that sets that. And it sets it so that basically they're planning on it 10 years from now. The difficulty with that is, what if it doesn't happen? That's why I'm saying that at this particular time, I'm working almost, and I follow what you're saying, I'm almost working from the other side of it. The other side is this. I feel that as a leader of this district, I would be successful, not a matter of looking at what buildings are going to be improved or built brand new. I'm looking at the improvement from my standpoint on the maintenance side of which buildings can we walk away from. I mean, I want to be able, in just, my success of trying to help this district out is there are several buildings that we should not put money into. And you don't have to. You can utilize this to succeed just in that particular part of it. But to end up having a plan that's down the road 10, 20 years, I know I've had that discussion with a number of different people. I just feel that that's really hard. You say to iron it out, we're not going to iron it out. I don't believe you can conceivably get that ironed out in most any community, let alone Hayes, of trying to identify 10 years from now, what are we going to be ready for at that time? I'd love to think that we do have the capability of creating options that have flexibility and the capability to work with that it gives you many other options 7 years from now to end up considering for another bond election to make that happen 10 years from now. That's what I'm referring to. I mean, if things really changed, if the economy was fantastic, if oil prices went tremendously up, if everything looked really wonderful, and even if enrollment increased and there was more people that came into Hayes, 7, 8 years from now, if a community ends up saying, we want to spend the money that it would take to put a new high school in, fantastic. I mean, that's great. But the issue of saying that right now we're planning on it, I think we're going to be still beating our heads against the wall instead of just working from the other side of it, what is our issue right now? Our issue right now is get away from buildings we don't want to put money into. If you look at our maintenance, we talked about that. We're putting money into Roosevelt, we're putting money into the high school, we're putting money into the middle school. We don't want to put money into some of our other buildings because we're afraid that it would be wasted money. You know, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, how much money are you going to put into it? You don't want to turn around, put $1 million into a building, and 5 years from now walk away from it. You don't want to do that. And that's what I'm addressing. I think the focal point is more trying to address that, because there's several buildings we can walk away from, which is going to then free up capital outlay money to end up addressing in different ways as well. And there's no decision tonight. I just felt that this was the time. There's been discussions. I have not had, but maybe I have talked a lot, I don't know, but I've never talked from the standpoint of just saying, this is what I feel has been the summary in my thoughts as far as other people talking of what needs to be done at this time.
I mean, I think you could go back and look at every plan that I've seen since, I think, '08, and there's the buildings that remain in any plan that I've seen are Hayes High and Hayes Middle School and Roosevelt.
Agreed.
Other than that, I've seen a plan to get rid of every other building. And maybe even Roosevelt, I think, was in that plan to get rid of. So the problem with that is, though, is even if you build, I mean, you're talking those numbers are an elementary school. If we build an elementary school that doesn't address Rockwell, it doesn't address Washington, it doesn't address Lincoln or Laughlin, and those are the four that are most talked about, and then Wilson.
That's right.
So, but if we just say, well, we're going to go build an elementary school, and we pass a bond and do that, what's the plan? Because I don't want to just look at it from this board's perspective, because that's the easy part, to say, well, we're done, we washed our hands of it. If I'm gone in 5 years or 7 years, I don't have to deal with it. But if you wait 5 or 7 years to start talking about bond 2, you're then 5 to 7 years from that date. So every other community that does a lot of bonds, that transitions from one to the next, they already know what phase 2 is. They know that phase 2 is going to be X or Y, and phase 3 is this. We may never get there. You're right. It may not pass, but the fact that it may not pass doesn't mean we don't plan for it. And, you know, I mean, I think we still have to do that.
No, I may be idealistic, but I like the idea that an option 1 would have the discussion points of, even at this point in time, looking to the future, this is an option, this is an option, this is an option that could tie to this one 10 years from now. Option 2, the same way. You end up having that they're not closed mind to just this point, but there are options that link to what each one of these can end up doing for the future. Doesn't tie you in. It just makes this all the more flexible of basically you have choices here that then allow for choices in the future. That's what I'm trying to say, is that flexibility part of it. I do not want an option here that basically, no matter what you do, what that option is, the committee or the board or whoever's talking about it can't come up with anything more than just one other option. You know, basically it kind of confines you to, this is probably the only thing that can be done 10 years from now. And you know what's hard about this is, you've been part of a lot of these different options that's been talked about. I have too. I'm not talking about any one of them, and I don't want to, because anything that's talked about right now as options would go out to the media saying, these are what we're thinking about. And that's unfair, because it really should come from a committee, it should come from you to identify what it is. And tonight's not the night to say what those options are. I mean, I have a half a dozen I could probably write up there right now and identify these are things that could be done within this price range. And I know that you have probably that many too, of trying to figure it out. So I'm throwing it your way for thought, okay? That's it. It's just thought at this point. Not necessarily any decision. And I know we're getting close to 9 o'clock, but I was being, I think, more bold than typical. You know, of just trying to push this of saying, I think we can do it. I think this makes sense. I think we end up having enough information that we can actually create something that the public will support. And I think that it will, with that kind of thought in mind, could end up creating that those other options, that it sets a stage very well for your successor. You know, wouldn't that be wonderful if 8 years from now, the people that are sitting here end up saying, you know, thank you to the board members that made the decisions, you know, 8 years earlier.
To me, I guess the next question is, and I think Greg started this one, is so those 4 to 5 choices that we're going to narrow down to 1 to 3 that the board's going to do, who comes up with that? You know, I know Josh is ready. I mean, are we to the point where we're okay to let Josh and his team start something? Are we okay to let a vision team start something? And I'm even okay with Greg's idea. Are we okay that we still work on something? And I know that's maybe sound like more than 4 to 5, but if we all come with 2, now we have 6. I mean, at this point in time, what's the problem with having a lot of choices?
I remember they were up there and they were saying that they wanted us to set parameters, and I think that's where we're at.
I would agree.
And like you said about how many elementary schools do we agree on, I do think that's probably the next step. And I do think if we're talking about what buildings do we want to walk away from, how many elementary schools we want, that is the facilities planning that I was kind of hoping I'd see us go towards, is seeing what buildings we do want to get away from, how many elementary schools we want, and then there we're setting the parameters for those options. And those charts that you have, that you shared way while back, I think those are also a very good aggregate of what a lot of people have said themselves from the community, and looking at those also could help us long term.
I agree. I
Looking
think
at those
you got a good
options.
point. I think a lot of work's been done already, along with what, to Greg's point, I think there's been some plans already made, and we as a board should shape the plan that we want for the future. But I see where John's coming. If we keep talking about the big plan, and we never get a big plan, and that means we never get to the bond, we're never going to get anywhere. So I like this approach here, where let's start thinking about actually getting something with those parameters moving. We can also work up a big plan ourselves, and then modify the big plan as time goes on.
Well, on the next board meeting, on the 25th, in June,
Yeah.
I will list that will be parameters that we're going to end up talking on and trying to work from. Would that be appropriate?
Say that again. You're going to set parameters?
I think so.
No, you're going to set
Set
parameters.
On the, yeah, it'll be an agenda item. for the
Agenda
25th.
items? I'm fine.
We would
See,
set
one
those
advantage of the
parameters.
vision team, I'm not suggesting we go back that way at all, was, okay, we have a time frame. We have 15 weeks or whatever it was, and we're going to meet these deadlines, and we finally come up with a plan. Okay, it wasn't the best plan, but I think we need to do that ourselves if we're going to do it. Or we'll be talking a year from now about what kind of bond plan we want.
Well, I guess I would want what information you need that you don't already have to help.
Well, I'm not sure we do.
I don't want to,
Yeah.
there may be some information, well, you don't have to decide now, as you know that's coming up and there's something you want.
And the point that Greg ends up bringing up is solid as can be if you're talking about, if this was all planned for 10 years from now or whenever, that you're able to completely change this where there's 2 large elementaries, are they going to be 2 different elementaries that is K through 8? Or is the plan to consider that it's K through 2 and 3 through 5? You know, there is a transition in between there. And I say that because the benefits for anybody to hear this, you have true equity at that point. You don't have the old elementary and the brand new elementary, if that's the case. You have your children going to, I mean, your children are with all of Hayes' children going through this. You have that one transition, and I know we've talked about it actually from the standpoint of education. There's some great advantages of having it broken that way, of K through 2 and 3 through 5. The problem with having 4 different buildings or 3, the more buildings you have in trying to do that, and some big districts have this. They have a kindergarten center, and then you end up having a 1-2 building, and you have a 3-4 building, and just a 5. I mean, you have it broken that way where you have children that's transitioning every year or every other year. I think I could definitely support the transition in the middle of that because there's a big difference between K2 and then 3-5 as far as the learning level for the children and what you can provide at that time. Those are things that can and should be discussed as far as the options. Any last questions or thoughts right now?
I would like to hear from everybody what their plan is moving forward. I don't know, just what they think we need to do individually.
Well, board, I agree. We have to go through. I mean, we've got to come up with something as far as, whether it's the number of schools. I mean, I do believe there's a lot of questions like that do need to be answered before we get into some of this, but a lot of it seems like things that we've talked about several times, just over the different bonds, whether it was the first bond, the second bond. But yeah, coming up with a decision as far as a lot of that, I think we have to decide and come up with a game plan before we move into some of these. So. I don't have the answer to what that is, but.
I know there's questions that we'd probably want answered now, and to separate it out for future discussion, knowing what parameters we want to set would be good, versus if we start getting on the topic of who's on the committee or how we want the sections of the school to end up being. I feel like that could take away from the parameters that we need to be focused on and talking about. So, I mean, once we get to agenda requests, I might request something to that extent.
Well, it does seem that we do need some more information probably on, maybe some advice from our education experts on different ways of doing things, as you mentioned, the different kind of level of buildings. During the whole vision team and all that stuff, we talked about the importance of four section schools, maybe 6 section schools, whatever the case. Maybe we need some information on what, I guess ultimately, the facilities we have need to be the best for our kids, right? I mean, that makes sense, for education. And then within the boundaries of these parameters here. So if we decide 2 schools is the best way to go, let's just decide to go for 2 schools, and then we worry about the details later. But I don't know, how do we want to do this? Is it another meeting to all of us throw these ideas around and come up with a plan? I don't have an answer either, but I'm kind of concerned that we'll just are spinning our wheels after a while.
So we decided that we're going to put on the agenda for the next time the setting parameters for a committee, right? Is that what we decided? We're not going to talk about who the committee is, just the parameters. I would say, it would be my recommendation that between now and that meeting date, actually probably 10 to 15 days before that meeting date, we get you guys a list of questions. I just know my brain goes to mush at a certain point here, and we're crossing that line. I get up at 4:30 and so that way we have time to think about it, fresh head, get them a list of questions that we want answered. That way when we come back, there's a pattern to what we're doing, and we stay focused on just the parameters and not the committee or the next step or anything like that.
Okay.
And if you want the parameters set to be, what's the dollar amount, what's the time span, what's the number of buildings, what you want those parameters to
It might be
be.
that easy. It might just be the time span, the dollar amount, and how many buildings, and then let Josh's team take over. And then come
Single
back to us.
project or multiple projects, I
You're
would
good.
add.
Or we take the vision team's plan and break it into
Keep
pieces.
the cost rate
Say,
low.
okay, we have 20 million bucks, let's see what the vision team, we can do with that. Which I'm actually staying away from, because I kind of like the idea of 2 schools, not 3, but that's another issue.
But if there's the meeting on the 25th, I would say by the 10th,
Yeah.
you guys need enough time, 2 weeks, to answer questions. Or if you're getting questions from 27 different parameters and you're like, that's going to be too many parameters, we need to focus in, or this is the majority of the parameters that we need to discuss, that way you guys can get a feel on where everybody's coming from
Right.
too.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything to add?
You don't have any? Where are you at?
Well, I mean, I like the idea of, I think the next step really is those parameters. I mean, we need to set what this committee or committees are gonna be. I mean, that definitely has to be, and we've said that before. That's one of our main guidelines. I mean, I hear what you're saying with the long-term plan. The plan is a tough one. To me, it's a long-term concept, because at the end of the day, you know, in 10 years, everything's gonna be different, and I'm not against having a long-term concept. I'm a little concerned, you know, our plan is in 15 years we replace the high school. I do hope that nobody takes that from a negative perspective. Well, they're looking at a high school again. Oh my goodness, I'm just going to say no right now. You know, and I worry about the negative Nellies running with that a little bit. And as long as we're not saying that, as long as we're saying our concept is we're going to replace this, and then we address this, and then we address this and this, and it's not well, we got to do this third. You know what I mean? Whereas if it's if the public or the economy or everything changes and maybe our third thing has just gone away. It doesn't exist anymore, and now this moves up. Or this has now become more important. You know, I mean, we had a major problem. This building has now reached a status where it is a higher priority and it could be moved into third slot or whatever else, then that's what we would need to do. So.
I thought that was well said with the concepts, because I think maybe the long-range plan, just that terminology has probably confused people or maybe even hurt our progress a little bit. So I really like using the word long-term concepts.
And hopefully, you know, I mean, the idea is that it's designed well enough that just follows suit and everything goes wonderful, but it doesn't, I think it does need to be adaptive. You know, I wouldn't want to spend money or pigeonhole us down a direction that all of a sudden a board 15, 20 years from now is going, oh my gosh, what did they commit us to? So.
Well, Greg will be on the board, so he can tell us how.
I just want to, what I heard is, the 2 things I heard we need to decide is how many elementary schools we're going to have, and are we or are we not going to have a committee, and if so, how is that committee formed? So why don't we put those 2 agenda items on at some point and get those decided, and then you can take step 2.
Yeah, sounds good.
Or 3, however you want to look at it.
Yeah. I agree.
So then to Manny's question, what questions do you have to help decide those? Or what information do you need from any of us? Let us know.
It was the same, yeah, and I mean, I'll email you some stuff, but like, just like with the RFPs and things like that, what's the pros, what's the cons of a K through 2, 3 through 5, or a K through 8, or 4 versus 6, because we don't know those things. You guys are the experts in that. You have to tell us, this success comes from this success comes from that.
And it may be those, when the committee comes up with options, I think that may be something we need to get feedback from the community, because it might work in one community, but it may not work in another community. So I think we can share pros and cons from, you know, what
Research has shown.
research or evidence practice, but again, that may be something the committee then takes to decide to configure it. Let's say 2, but then the option might be, is it going to be K2, 3, 5, or 2, because you're going to have 36 sections no matter what, probably. That may be something then even included in the survey, or the committee could take to the community as well. But yes, we can get the information to help guide some of that discussion.
I think the overall concept of that would be is that we're not just going out and trying to say, I want to go spend some money. I want to go spend $20 million and we got to get a bond passed because we want to go spend $20 million. The concept is why in the world are we even talking about it?
Yeah.
So what, from an educational standpoint, what are the benefits from a financial
Your guys
standpoint?
are trying to measure all these things with KISA. How do we get there? What's the best way to
Well,
get there?
and then it's easy to go back on everything that we've talked about and say, well, these are the reasons we made these decisions
Yeah.
based off of this evidence.
And that would help set
this.
those parameters.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we have to check that just a little bit, only from the standpoint, we know the one building is the most efficient. I mean, it is.
Sure.
I mean, but it's not going to.
But at the end of the day, though, I think that's something we
happen.
can go back to. I mean, again, we can have
Yeah, and-
2 or 3 different options, and you can have the pros and cons of this one, and the pros and cons, and maybe the one building, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, but, you know,
You only have to
it's,
look for.
it's easy to go through and look at all those, right?
There are fantastic benefits to end up having that break, like I said, the equity of going from, you know, the kids who go to every building. You can't say that one's going to a worse building, you know.
Right.
Right.
They go, there's that, as well as then you have the staff that act for professional development, for other reasoning. There's no question, but there are plenty of districts throughout the state that don't go that way because people don't want it. Not because it's necessarily what's best or it's just.
Right.
I mean, the same thing goes for, we have plenty of evidence that when you, high school students, when should we start school in the morning? It should be later. It should be 9 o'clock. It should be 10 o'clock. We know, I don't, anybody who brings up that conversation with me, I don't argue with them. I know that's the case. It would be better if we started school at 9:30 for high school students.
I just want you to start at even time.
But why don't we do it?
Right.
Because of the scheduling with families, you know, you just, it's
Well,
just,
right, because if you have multiple
Yeah.
students, then you're going
you don't,
to 2 schools versus 1 school.
There's
You have
plenty of
middle schooler. So, I mean, those are the things that, even though it might make sense, to some of us, it may not be what.
and Greg, there's no arguing what you said about school all around the year. It is better. It is the better way to do it. But Kansas doesn't do that. Why? Because we got stuck with agricultural reasons years ago and we never got out of that. I mean,
200, but
It's a slow evolution.
I agree, though, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's easy then to look at all the pros and cons of each one of those and go through and say, okay, and you know, like you said, whether it's the year-round school or whether it's the one building, it's easy to come and say, well, yeah, it might work somewhere else, but we can look, here's the pros and cons, but in this area, it's a no sale, it's not gonna work here, so let's look at our next 2 options then. These are what are on the table, and let's move forward with options 2, 3, and 4 as far as our options here, and what are the pros and cons of each one of those, and where can we go?
well, clearly I heard from Andy the questions that need to be sent to you, so you have many of those different possibility of options. The other ends up being from Greg saying that there should be the committee, you know, definitely at the next meeting, identify committee and also number of buildings, you know, if it's, how many
we
elementary-
can't have that number of buildings discussion until we have that data.
That's what, if we
Right.
give them the information, that way we
So
can
it might be
have.
2 meetings or 3.
Yeah,
you know.
Wait, what?
Well, why do we want,
Why
I
do
mean,
we
what's the
want 2
benefit of
buildings?
1 versus 4? And
They're gonna give us
I
the,
wasn't sure.
Yeah.
If we just give them
Separation of
only
class.
2 weeks to get that, we may not get that information
Like
until
the-
right
right, you
before,
can do
so.
that today.
right?
Yes, we may be able to get tone in very close to where we are. I mean, that's a lot for you guys to put together. Sure. You don't have anything else to do right now?
Very good. Thank you, guys. Any other discussion on that? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is discussions by board members and agenda requests. And I think we have the item on there, which is the scheduling board retreat. And I would assume that's just a matter of probably trying to come up with a date or whatever. Maybe we do like a doodle poll or something as far as,
I think that's the way to do it, is use the doodles poll.
Sarah is the doodle master.
Do we want to do evenings, or is the Saturday still desired? I know that's always a debatable question.
How much time do you need, John?
Is this in August?
Well, I wouldn't go beyond 2 hours,
Okay.
so 1.5 to, you know.
Are we looking August, or are we talking, 'cause that will change my decision.
July or August, John?
Nobody cares. Maybe. So, nobody
Sorry,
cares.
what?
Decisions.
With the budget and finance, would it be better to do it a little bit later, or do we not need to?
September, October.
do that?
I don't think, for what we're going to be addressing, I don't think it matters. I mean, I think largely it could be June, July, or August.
Does it make any sense to do it after school starts?
It's a little later than I was
Well,
thinking.
no, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I was thinking before school started, but that still included half of August. but-
Evenings
I would
sound good.
include Saturdays if it's the front half of August. After that, then I start to watch football, sorry. There's football games to watch on Saturdays.
Well, maybe it's Sarah just putting a lot of choices. I mean, that's just a lot of
Really
choices.
narrow it down.
I like it.
I don't mind meetings. My kids have a lot of activities on Saturdays and Sundays. They're really great to junkie around.
Actually, I don't even remember 2 years ago when it was. It was on a
We've done a
Saturday.
Saturday a couple times.
We did a Saturday once, and then I thought we did an evening.
Yeah.
And a lot in the evening worked okay. I think we actually ended up doing, like we ate, we did like a meal or whatever. And, yeah.
Okay. We'll do that.
Very good. Any other discussion or agenda requests?
I'd like to request to put Chromebox pilot program discussion on the agenda.
I didn't hear that.
The Chromebook.
Right, that's on
We have-
July
It is on.
25th,
Yep.
or June 25th.
Any other discussion or agenda requests? Okay. And I don't think we need an exec session tonight, do we, John?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Nobody has anything else. Meeting's adjourned.